Chapter 2063. Amaze the world with a single brilliant feat? I don't think that's necessary. Even if she has extremely high talent, how old is she now? At most, she's a high-level craftsman. When some people praised her, there were naturally people who criticized her. After all, there were many people who didn't like Chu Luiyue. I also heard that Rong Xiu can already refine a king divine weapon. He has already broken through to become a king craftsman. However, even so, it was still far from enough to take the lead in this competition. After all, there are so many craftsmen venerables present. Shengguan Yu wants to win? I think it's difficult. That's true. Perhaps she's just forcing herself to hold on now? If we wait any longer, she probably won't be able to take it and will choose to give up. This wait lasted for another 3 days. At this time, more than half of the people had been eliminated. Only a dozen people were still persisting. Among these people, 9 of them were craftsmen venerables, and 6 were craftsmen kings. Only Chu Luiyue's level was unknown. Yes, even Chu Luiyue didn't know her own strength. That was because she didn't put much effort into crafting. All this time, she was either the one who was causing trouble for others or she was the one who was causing trouble for others. All her time and effort were used to deal with these things. Hence, she didn't have much experience in crafting. The last time she seriously crafted a divine weapon was when she helped Chang Wanzhou forge the Cloud Sky Copper Sword. After such a long time, she didn't know how strong she was in this aspect. According to her own speculation, she was probably at the level of a high-level craftsman. Of course, this level couldn't be compared to the craftsmen kings and craftsmen venerables present. However, the key was that the heavenly square cauldron was a divine weapon. Chu Luiyue indeed couldn't directly refine a king divine weapon or a venerable divine weapon like them. She could only try her best to use the heavenly square cauldron to activate the Tianlei. However, this wasn't a foolproof method. Chu Luiyue looked up slightly and glanced at the heavenly square cauldron in front of her. Streams of light flickered, clear and lustrous, sacred and powerful. Even the karmic fire inside was burning more vigorously than before. The heavenly square cauldron was about to reach its limit. Even if the origin power in her body was inexhaustible and her spirit could barely support it, the heavenly square cauldron couldn't hold any more. The heavenly lightning above seemed to have sensed something, and the speed at which it struck gradually slowed down. Some of the silver light that had gathered above Chu Luiyue's head began to disperse. The surrounding people quickly noticed this. A commotion broke out in the crowd. It seems like Shengguan Yu won't be able to hold on for much longer. It's about time. How long has it been? However, to be able to stimulate all the potential of the heavenly square cauldron, he does have some ability. I wonder if she regrets her initial decision? Yu, do you need my help? Dumpling flew to Chu Luiyue's side and asked crisply. Chu Luiyue gently shook his head. I can't, and I don't need to. But, Dumpling pouted angrily. However, those people said that Yu was going to lose. Chu Luiyue looked up and smiled at her. Don't worry, Dumpling. She suddenly stood up. This was the first time she stood up since the start of the competition. As soon as he moved, he attracted the attention of many people. Even Shangguan Jing and the others who were focused on refining the divine artifact turned their heads to look at her. Tang Ke's voice rang out. Girl, are you going to admit defeat? Everyone held their breaths. Tang Ke didn't ask any questions when so many people had withdrawn from the competition. At this point, Chu Luiyue had just stood up when he spoke. However, everyone knew that Tang Ke had been paying attention to Chu Luiyue since the beginning, so they weren't surprised and waited patiently. Then, they saw the girl raise her eyebrows and smile. Why would I? She said slowly. I just wanted to get up and move my body after sitting for a long time. As she said that, she really did turn her waist and move her muscles and bones. Her posture was relaxed and her expression was relaxed. She didn't look like she was under any pressure from the competition. Pretentious. Wei Zhe sneered disdainfully. He didn't believe that she could do anything. Chu Luiyue tilted her head and glanced at Wei Zhe with a faint smile. It seems that the head of the family Wei is really concerned about me. Looking into those clear but dark and indifferent eyes, Wei Zhe's heart skipped a beat and he subconsciously looked away. Then he realized that he didn't look imposing at all. So he turned his head again and wanted to say something to get back at her. You, swoosh. Just as he started to speak, he was interrupted by a sharp and cold sound of something breaking through the air. Something had suddenly appeared in Chu Liyue's hand and was rapidly unfurling. It was a red scroll that looked like a painting. However, it faintly emitted a suppressive aura that no one dared to underestimate. Wei Zhe was still in a daze when someone in the crowd cried out in surprise. Flowing clouds flying illustration. Wei Zhe widened his eyes and didn't pay attention for a moment before he started coughing violently. Cough, cough, cough. Chu Liyue asked with concern. What's wrong with the head of the family Wei? Did you choke on something? Wei Zhe's face was red from coughing. When he finally stopped coughing, he was about to defend himself when he saw Chu Liyue smiling at him with the flowing clouds flying illustration in her hand. The words stuck in his throat couldn't come out. Flowing clouds flying illustration. It was also one of the 10 great divine artifacts. Why was this thing in Chu Liyue's hands? That's right. This thing was the Nan family's treasure. Previously, the Nan family had suffered a great loss at the hands of Chu Liyue. Even the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan, had fallen at the Peach Blossom Cove. Therefore, it wasn't strange that the flowing clouds flying illustration had fallen into Chu Liyue's hands. During the battle at the Peach Blossom Cove, Chu Liyue had purposely released the news to intimidate everyone. However, the people outside weren't very clear about the specific situation. Chu Liyue had specially instructed them not to spread the news about the flowing clouds flying illustration. Therefore, not many people knew about it. Now that she had suddenly taken it out, it naturally caused everyone to be shocked. Countless gazes fell on Chu Liyue with different emotions. In the Divine Ruins world, even the first-rate families and clans might not have a divine artifact. However, Chu Liyue alone had 2 of them. How could this not cause people's emotions to surge? Chu Liyue turned a blind eye to those gazes. She unfolded the flowing clouds flying illustration, then closed her eyes and circulated the force in her body. Boom, boom, boom. The numerous tenlei above seemed to have been summoned as they descended one after another, heading straight for the flowing clouds flying illustration. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 2064. Seeing this scene, everyone was dumbfounded. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes in satisfaction. The heavenly square cauldron was full, but she had more than one divine artifact. Seeing the smile on Chu Liyue's face, Wei Zhe instantly understood something. You've already prepared all of this, haven't you? Chu Liyue nodded without hesitation and smiled. Family Wei leader is really amazing. You can even see through this? Wei Zhe was so angry that his face turned pale and his body trembled. At this very moment, anyone with eyes would be able to see it. Who was she mocking? Just as he was about to say something, Chu Liyue spoke again. I know that my talent and strength can't be compared to yours. If I want to win this competition, it will be extremely difficult. Fortunately, I've always been lucky and have a few divine artifacts. Perhaps I can use them to fight? Wei Zhe's anger was stuck in his chest and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Good luck? A few divine artifacts? Fight with them? What kind of language is this? The treasures that countless families and clans in the world of divine ruins coveted were like cabbages to her. Is there any justice in this world? How was he going to let others live? Ah, right, Family Wei leader also had a divine artifact before, right? As soon as Chu Liyue finished speaking, a low buzzing sound was heard. Buzz. Rong Xiao stood beside the Thousand Peaks halberd and retracted his hand. It's here. Chu Liyue shook her head regretfully. It's a pity that it has changed owners. Otherwise, wouldn't it be much easier for Family Wei leader to win this round? You're wrong. Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows and corrected a small mistake. This Thousand Peaks halberd didn't recognize Family Wei leader as its owner before, so it can't be considered a change of owners. Chu Liyue suddenly understood. Look at me, I actually forgot about this. Family Wei Master, I didn't mean to offend you, please forgive me. Wei Zhe had completely lost his temper. He finally understood that these two people were in cahoots with each other. Bickering with them won't give you any advantage at all. He waved his sleeves fiercely and snorted coldly. I hope you can laugh until the end. Controlling the heavenly square cauldron had already consumed a lot of energy. Now, Chu Luiwei had summoned the flowing clouds diagram. She really wasn't afraid of death. He wanted to see how long she could hold on. Wei Zhe reluctantly retracted his thoughts and no longer paid any more attention to him. Chu Luiwei was too lazy to continue talking to him. He spread out the flowing cloud-flying diagram in front of him and sat cross-legged again. There seemed to be a layer of faint luster on top of the thick ink and heavy color pattern. Streaks of Tianlei, containing an astonishing aura and power, continuously fell into it and quickly disappeared. Chu Luiwei held her breath and focused. For a moment, sparks flew in all directions in front of her. The brilliant and dazzling light reflected the calmness and indifference between her brows. This round, she must win. Chu Luiwei's sudden move stunned everyone present. After a long time, everyone finally realized what had happened. After a difficult mental struggle, they finally accepted all of this. No wonder Chu Luiwei was so confident. It turned out that she had already planned this from the beginning. If one divine artifact wasn't enough, there was another one. Who could withstand this? Even if it were the weapon-refining venerables present, how many of them could go head-to-head with this? The key was that no one could say anything about her actions. After all, those two divine artifacts really did belong to her? Previously, they had tried their best to cancel Dumpling's qualification. They had thought that Chu Luiwei would be helpless from then on. Who would have thought that? And from the beginning, she had already asked clearly that the Tianlei triggered by the divine artifact would be counted in her final result. Tangke had said it herself. Who had the guts to refute and question it? Chu Luiwei was so young, but she was so scheming. Everyone had different thoughts, but Chu Luiwei didn't take these to heart at all. She had already given them enough face. If it weren't for the trouble and wanting to teach these people a lesson, she wouldn't have spent so much effort to deal with this competition. Only by defeating them fair and square would she be able to obtain Tangke's inheritance without any worries. Another few days passed. One after another, people chose to give up. In the end, there were only 3 people left in the competition: Chu Luiwei, Sheng Guanjing, and Wei Zhe. Sheng Guanjing was recognized as a powerhouse. Everyone expected him to stay until the end. As for the remaining 2 people, they were quite controversial. Chu Luiwei had 2 holy artifacts on her side. Even though the crowd had different opinions about this, they had to admit that she did have some capabilities. In comparison, Wei Zhe was more surprising. Although he was the head of the family Wei, had a noble status, and was quite powerful, compared to the people present, he wasn't the best. After all, this time, there were refining big shots who hadn't come out of seclusion for many years. Normally, when he met these people, he would have to be courteous. But now, those people couldn't take it anymore and chose to withdraw, but Wei Zhe unexpectedly persisted until now. This was a little surprising. Rong Xiu glanced at Wei Zhe and smiled. The head of the family Wei is hiding his strength. Wei Zhe didn't seem to hear him. He was focused on devouring the power of Tianlei around him. There was a purple-black hammer in front of him. The hammer was engraved with ancient patterns, and its aura was restrained and heavy. The power of Tianlei fell on the hammer. He had taken it out at the beginning of the competition. Until now, it had devoured a lot of power of Tianlei, but it didn't change much. It didn't reach a state of saturation like the heavenly square cauldron either. This was interesting. Everyone could tell that the purple-black hammer was a venerable divine artifact. It was very powerful outside, but it wasn't enough here. But now, the amount of power of Tianlei it contained had surpassed the heavenly square cauldron, which was a divine artifact. At first, the people didn't feel that something was wrong, but as time passed, they finally realized that the hammer was indeed unusual. Rong Xiu glanced at it indifferently, and there seemed to be waves surging in his eyes. At this point, Tuanzi came to Rong Xiu's side, tilted its head, and sized up the purplish-black hammer as it muttered softly. She muttered, "Something is wrong with that thing." Rong Xiu looked down at her. "What's wrong?" Dumpling hesitated and said uncertainly, "I don't know. I can't say for sure, but it's just not right. It's like, Rong Xiu smiled. Dumpling couldn't help but ask, "Your Highness, why are you smiling? Aren't you worried that you will lose?" Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. He looked lazy, but he was extremely confident. She will never lose. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2065. Dumpling nodded seriously. "Yes. Since you and His Highness said that we won't lose, we definitely won't lose." As she spoke, she sighed regretfully. Sigh, it's a pity that Dumpling can't help much in this round. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. It's good if you can take this opportunity to improve your strength. After all, Dumpling was Chu Liyue's magical beast. If Dumpling's strength improved, it would be a good thing for Chu Liyue. Dumpling was greatly encouraged and clenched her small fists. His Highness is right. Then I'll go now. Before her voice died away, the small reddish-gold figure disappeared into the vast Tianlai Sea again. Rong Xiu looked up slightly. More than 10 days had passed, but the number of Tianlai in this vast space didn't seem to decrease by much. Clearly, they had devoured a lot of Tianlai before, but compared to the vast Tianlai Sea, it was still not worth mentioning. Looking up, they could only see dazzling light and silver light flashing. After all, Tang had accumulated Tianlai for 10,000 years. Rumble. Suddenly, a series of explosions came one after another. Rong Xiu looked away and saw countless Tianlai striking down at the same time. They went straight for Shangguanjing. In front of him, the docking jade spirit embryo finally showed the shape of a sword after being polished by countless Tianlai for a long time. A layer of dazzling silver light covered it, making it almost impossible to look directly at it. The powerful pressure that was spreading out from above was still rising. More and more Tianlai landed on it and polished it bit by bit. Even Shangguanjing's figure was shrouded by the brilliant light, making it difficult to distinguish him. Is Shangguanjing's divine artifact finally going to be completed? Among the three of them, he is the only one who attracted the heavenly lightning purely by forging a divine weapon. If I remember correctly, the Doc Jade Spirit embryo should have already devoured thousands of heavenly lightning during this period of time. As expected, he's powerful. Such ability really makes people sigh in admiration. Of all of us here, how many can be mentioned in the same breath as him? In my opinion, Shangguanjing is indeed the best among us when it comes to refining tools. However, he did not know who would have the last laugh in this competition. Shangguanjing had already reached the final step of forging the divine weapon in his hand. Countless bolts of heavenly lightning came crashing down, completely annihilating the long sword forged from the Doc Jade Spirit embryo. At this moment, the energy in his body was almost completely exhausted. This was the largest amount of Tianlai he had ever triggered in his entire life when he was refining a divine artifact. Not bad. Without a doubt, this was a venerable artifact. Moreover, it was the most powerful existence he could refine in his entire life. The shocking commotion even attracted the attention of Chu Liyue and Wei Zhe. The two of them also raised their heads and looked over. Chu Liyue's eyes lit up. This was the first time she had seen Taizu refining a venerable artifact with her own eyes. It was even more shocking than she had imagined. Wei Zhe clenched his fists tightly, and deep jealousy surged from the bottom of his heart. He knew very well that with his talent, even if he cultivated for another 100 years, he would not be able to reach Shangguanjing's level. Fortunately, he still had his own trump card. It did not matter if he could not compare to Shangguanjing for the time being. Only the one who could last until the end would be able to obtain Tang Ke's inheritance. Thinking of this, he took a deep look at the purple-black hammer in front of him. Buzz. The sword hummed. Shangguanjing finally stretched out his hand and gripped the Doc Jade Spirit sword in front of him tightly. In an instant, terrifying sword chi spread out in all directions. It was almost about to cut open space. A gentle yet vigorous energy slowly surged forth, completely surrounding the sword Qi. Tang Ke's voice sounded with a smile. This is almost the top level among the venerable artifacts. It's just a little bit away from breaking through the shackles and becoming a divine artifact. Shangguan Jing, you are indeed very outstanding. His words were filled with undisguised praise and admiration. In the current world, there were very few people who could refine a divine artifact of such a standard. Shangguan Jing carefully sized up the long sword in his hand and was very excited. The timing, location, and people were right. To a large extent, he was able to succeed this time because of the power of Tianlei here. Although he did not break through the threshold and truly forge a divine artifact, in fact, Shangguan Jing was already very satisfied. He knew that if he wanted to advance to the next level, it was far from as simple as everyone thought. Otherwise, after Tang Ku and Mr. Su, no one in the Divine Ruins world had successfully refined a divine artifact for 10,000 years. He vaguely sensed that if he wanted to do this, he would need some kind of help, but he was not sure what it was exactly. This dark jade spirit sword was the strongest divine artifact that he could refine with all his life's knowledge. He took a deep breath. Thank you, Senior Tang Ku. If it were not for this place, he did not know how much effort he would have to put in to forge this sword. Tang Ku laughed. There's no need to thank me. After all, you're outstanding enough. Do you still want to continue this competition? Shangguan Jing paused for a moment, shook his head, and sighed with a smile. The crowd immediately quieted down. They were a little surprised by Shangguan Jing's decision, but they felt that it was reasonable. This sword had already exhausted his strength. Even if he forced himself to continue, it might be meaningless. It was better to end it here. In the last period of time, the dark jade spirit sword had devoured a lot of Tianlei. Compared to the three of them, it was still unknown who would win. Even if Shangguan Jing lost in the end, he had forged such a top venerable divine artifact. This time, he had made a huge profit. Okay. Tang Ke did not seem surprised by his choice. Here, you have devoured a total of 1,381 Tianlei, and you are currently ranked first. If the two of them can't surpass your number, the winner will be you. This number made many people secretly speechless. If you have the opportunity in the future, it might not be impossible for you to refine a divine artifact. Tang Ke's last sentence immediately made everyone suck in a breath of cold air. Was this an admission that Shangguan Jing had the potential to refine a divine artifact? Shangguan Jing's heart skipped a beat, and then he lowered his head slightly. Thank you for your kind words. Everyone had different expressions, and the way they looked at Shangguan Jing was very different from before. Since Tang Ke had said so, it was basically confirmed. Even if Shangguan Jing did not win this time, the news of what he saw today was enough to shock the world and make them admire him. Shangguan Jing cupped his fists and bowed politely. Then he turned around and walked towards the entrance. Seeing his arrival, everyone couldn't help but feel nervous. Shangguan, congratulations. The few old men who came with Shangguan Jing were the first to react and went forward to congratulate him. The rest of the people hurriedly echoed. Congratulations, Senior Shangguan. Senior has been silent for many years. Now that you're making a move again, it's indeed amazing. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 2066. Everyone's attitude had an obvious change. After Tang Ku and Mr. Su, no one else in the Divine Ruins world had successfully refined a divine weapon in the past 10,000 years. Now Tang Ke had personally said that Shangguan Jing had a chance. This was the first one in 10,000 years. Naturally, it was different. In the past, although Shangguan Jing was also famous, there were many weapon-refining venerables in the world, and each of them was very arrogant. No one was willing to lower their heads and admit defeat. Even if they met, they couldn't stand each other. This was also why some people secretly mocked Shangguan Jing, Chu Luiyue, and the rest at the start. But it was different now. Tang Ke's words were like gold. From now on, who could be compared with Shangguan Jing? The future weapon refining saint, These few words, just thinking about it, made people feel the pressure increase by several times. If Shang Guanjing really succeeded in breaking through in the future, he would be worthy of being the top weapon refining master. At that time, it wouldn't be so easy to make friends with him. If they didn't seize the opportunity now, how could they have a chance in the future? Everyone was much more polite and respectful to Shang Guanjing. They were afraid that he would remember their previous offense. Shang Guanjing smiled and cupped his hands. Thank you for your compliments. I'm just lucky. I don't dare to expect anything else. Now, I only hope that you can successfully end this competition. Although he was smiling, he was very polite. His eyes were clear and calm. Obviously, he didn't take the crowd's eagerness and flattery seriously. After that, he raised his eyes and looked at Chu Luiyue, who was still in the field. It was obvious that he was stubborn. Seeing this, everyone could only temporarily dispel the many thoughts in their hearts. Shang Guanjing had lived for so many years. He had once been all-powerful and had experienced life and death. What kind of scene had he not seen? Such an old fox was very slippery. At this time, it was useless to say anything. The crowd gradually quieted down. No matter what, they could only wait until the competition was over. Now, only Chu Luiyue and Wei Zhe were left in the field, and they were still in the final competition. Above the two of them, Tianlei was continuously gathering and then falling continuously. In the entire space, everyone was silent. Time seemed to pass extremely slowly. At this point, everyone was certain that there was something wrong with the purplish-black hammer in front of Wei Zhe. What was it that could contain more Tianlei than the sacred tool? However, the competition was still ongoing. Since that item was indeed Wei Zhe's, it wasn't considered a violation of the rules. Naturally, everyone could only watch. In the silence, Tang Ke's voice rang out once more. Wei Zhe, 1382. A commotion broke out in the crowd. The amount of Tianlei that Wei Zhe had devoured had already surpassed that of Shang Guanjing. This also meant that Shang Guanjing was not fated to be first. Some people peeked at Shang Guanjing, only to find that he was calm and did not seem to be disappointed. Shang Guanjing had a bright future after being praised by Tang Ke. Even if he didn't win this round, it wouldn't affect him much. In fact, Shang Guanjing cared more about Chu Luiyue than whether he won or lost. Now, he only hoped that she could defeat Wei Zhe. There was something wrong with Wei Zhe's hammer. He didn't know how long it could last. After such a long time, the flowing cloud flying diagram seemed to be almost full. Looking at that calm face, Shang Guanjing clenched his fists. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. The past few days felt like a year to them. However, the winner of the competition hadn't been decided yet. Chu Luiyue had consumed a lot of force and spirit. At this moment, her face was a little pale, and her lips were pale. There was a faint bruise under her eyes, and she looked really haggard. Wei Zhe's situation seemed to be much better than Chu Luiyue's. After all, he was older, and in all aspects of cultivation, he was stronger than Chu Luiyue. If this continued, the one who would win in the end would probably be Wei Zhe. At this moment, the speed of Tianlei above the flowing cloud flying diagram had greatly decreased. Obviously, the number of Tianlei that the flowing cloud flying diagram could accommodate had reached its limit. Chu Luiyue stood up again. Wei Zhe turned his head, glanced at her, and snorted. What's wrong? Is Master you going to stretch your muscles again? The two saint artifacts were already saturated and she herself was obviously exhausted. He didn't believe that she could still come up with any tricks. This sentence was nothing more than sarcasm. However, Chu Luiyue acted as if she didn't understand him and smiled. She smiled and said, Master Family Wei is really prophetic. Nothing can be hidden from your eyes. Wei Zhe choked. Then, he saw Chu Luiyue raise her head slightly and ask, May I ask Senior Tang Ke, how much is the difference between me and Master Family Wei? Tang Ke said, Now, you are at 1562, and Wei Zhe is at 1895. The difference between the two of them was more than 300. This was definitely not a small number. Especially under the premise that the two of them had such a terrifying number, even if there was only one extra Dao, it was not to be underestimated. How could Chu Liwei catch up with such a huge difference? She looked like a lamp that had run out of oil. Chu Liwei thanked him and then lowered her head slightly, as if thinking about something. Wei Zhe laughed and pretended to comfort her. Master Yu, actually, it's already extraordinary that you can persevere until now. Now you are still young. In the future, you may be able to defeat me. What's the point of winning then? Chu Liwei raised her eyebrows slightly and interrupted Wei Zhe, who didn't know that today's victory would determine whether they could obtain Tang Ke's inheritance. If they lost today, it would be useless no matter how many times they won in the future. Wei Zhe stroked his beard and laughed. You're right, but who doesn't want to win? But sometimes, if you don't have the strength, you shouldn't ask for something that doesn't belong to you. Clang! Before he finished speaking, Chu Liwei suddenly attacked. A green shadow quickly streaked across the sky and then fiercely struck the ground. Crack! A few cracks spread out in an instant. Wei Zhe looked at it and suddenly opened his eyes in shock. It was a huge green axe. It was heavy, simple, and powerful. Most importantly, it was actually a sacred artifact. Let me introduce, this is one of the 10 great sacred artifacts, the Great Green Sun Axe. It used to belong to Family Yi, but now, it belongs to me. Chu Liwei said casually. Everyone's hearts were instantly set off by stormy waves. Yi Wentao's Great Green Sun Axe. It actually became Chu Liwei's? It recognized him as its master? Chu Liwei crossed her arms with one hand and held her chin with the other, muttering softly. This still seems a little slow. Digression, 12:30 p.m., 7th update. Remember the mobile version of the website. Chapter 2067. She looked up and glanced at Wei Zhe. Patriarch Wei, is it convenient for me to ask you something? How much of this hammer of yours have you unleashed? The corner of Wei Zhe's eyes twitched. How could she ask so directly? She's too rude. He gritted his teeth and said coldly, Master Yu, I advise you to stop struggling. Even if you have a third divine artifact, how much strength do you have left? It won't do you any good to hold on and exhaust your body. Chu Liwei smiled. I know my own body well, so you don't have to worry about it. You just have to answer my question. Wei Zhe frowned. Chu Liwei blinked. It seems that you don't want to talk about it. But it doesn't matter. After all, we're competitors now. It's normal for you to react this way. Wei Zhe felt suffocated. He shouldn't have asked this question. Why did it sound like he was being stingy when she said it? If that's the case, I can only do my best. Chu Liwei sighed. Wei Zhe was amused and angry at the same time. But, did Master Yu hold back before? Chu Liwei curled her lips and didn't say anything. Instead, she suddenly took 3 steps back. Then, with a thought, a stream of light flew out from the interspatial ring on her hand. A venerable artifact. Someone said in a low voice. The sword Qi was piercingly cold. What Chu Liwei summoned was her own red Shao sword. Wei Zhe was stunned at first, but then he couldn't help but laugh. But, Master, you can't summon more divine artifacts now, so you've replaced them with a venerable artifact? However, even if your cultivation as a craftsman isn't high, you should know that there's a huge gap between a venerable artifact and a divine artifact, right? So what if you summon another venerable one artifact? The Scarlet Heaven sword floated in the air. Chu Liwei flicked his finger, emitting a clear and melodious sword cry. She narrowed her eyes and her red lips curled into a small, playful smile. A venerable one's divine weapon is naturally insignificant in this battle. Who said I would only summon one? Just as she finished speaking, several streams of light gushed out from her palms. Dazzling rays of light appeared one after another and arranged themselves neatly in front of Chu Liwei in the blink of an eye. Wisps of aura spread out from it. 1, 2, 3, 8. Wei Zhe subconsciously counted again. Every time he called out a number, his eyes widened. As he counted to the end, his voice began to tremble, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. 8 pieces, 8 venerable artifacts. She must be crazy. She had summoned so many at once. Was she planning to use them to trigger Tianlei? She must have a death wish. Not only Wei Zhe, but the others who were watching were also in a state of confusion. Some suspected that they had seen wrongly and even counted back and forth a few times. However, there were indeed 8 pieces. The crowd was in an uproar. I remember now. Rumor has it that when they got married, Shang Guanjing gave her 6 venerable artifacts on the spot. I guess the ones in front of us are those, right? But aren't there 6 of them? Even with her scarlet heaven sword, there are only 7. Why is there an extra one? Hearing this, Chu Luiyue turned her head and explained with a smile, "There's another one. It's a gift from my father. However, it was originally made by Taizu." The extra one was naturally the Tianling scepter. As soon as she finished speaking, the Tianling scepter flew over and circled Chu Luiyue proudly, swaying back and forth happily. Chu Luiyue tapped it lightly. "Don't be so smug. If you don't do a good job later, I won't forgive you." On the Tianling scepter, the dragon's eyes shone brightly. After swaying a few times, it finally obediently returned to line up with the rest. Everyone was speechless. She had already taken the initiative to explain. What else was there to ask? One had to know that apart from the family Yi and the Nan family, the remaining first-rate families and clans would probably have to empty their pockets even if they could take out 8 venerable artifacts. But now, Chu Luiyue had taken out so many on her own. In fact, Chu Luiyue had even more in her hands. After all, she had previously exploited quite a lot from the family. However, if she summoned too many at once, she was worried that she might not be able to handle it. Moreover, it would be too ostentatious. Therefore, she planned to try these first. Of course, at this moment, Chu Luiyue had completely forgotten that she had summoned 3 venerable artifacts. What else could be more ostentatious than this? This should be enough. She let out a long breath. If it wasn't enough, she could just add more later. Wei Zhe was already in a daze. He was speechless. Ever since Chu Luiyue appeared, her every move had far exceeded Wei Zhe's expectations. He really didn't know what was in Chu Luiyue's head. Most importantly, where were her limits and limits? Wei Zhe closed his eyes and finally managed to regain his rationality. Master Yu is really rich and imposing. However, it seems like Master Yu doesn't understand the principle of biting off more than you can chew. In order to win, she was willing to do anything. Wasn't she afraid that she would choke to death? Chu Luiyue stretched her neck and wrists. After sitting for so long without rest or sleep, it would be strange if she wasn't tired. Master Family Wei will soon find out whether I can chew it to death or not. As she spoke, she closed her eyes and waited with bated breath. In the next moment, a turbulent force gushed out of her dantian. Above her, countless Tianlei seemed to have sensed something. They began to feel uneasy and gradually increased their swimming speed. Chu Luiyue shouted, "Fall!" As soon as she spoke, streaks of silver light struck down one after another. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2068. This time, the number of Tianlei that came crashing down was several times more than before. Sparks flew everywhere, and the light was blinding. Even Chu Luiyue's figure was almost shrouded by the white light, and it was difficult to see clearly. The rumbling sounds came one after another, almost causing one's ears to buzz. Wei Zhe looked at the scene in front of him in a daze, and for a moment he actually forgot to move. Chu Luiyue actually summoned so many Tianlei at once? How did she do it? Her force and spirit had already been exhausted to a terrifying extent, and logically speaking, she should be at her limit now. But how did she become even stronger? This time, not only did she use the Great Green Sun Axe, but she also used 8 venerable artifacts. There was indeed a huge gap between a venerable artifact and a holy artifact that was difficult to cross. However, when there were many of them, the accumulated power was also very shocking. At the very least, the number of Tianlei summoned by Chu Luiyue combined was not inferior to the Great Green Sun Axe. If she continued to progress at this speed, it wouldn't be long before the gap between the two of them would be closed. At that time, Wei Zhe might even be overtaken. What the hell? After a while, Wei Zhe came back to his senses and could not help but curse. Originally, he was sure to win. Now that he had been tossing around like this, he had consumed a lot of energy. However, no matter what, Chu Liwei had already continued, and it was useless for him to say anything. Helpless, Wei Zhe could only try his best to calm the anger in his heart and refocus his attention on the purple-black hammer in front of him. However, listening to the continuous movements from Chu Liwei's side, he could not completely calm down. Every once in a while, he could not help but turn his head to look. He had always thought that Chu Liwei was only using this radical method to win, and that she would not be able to last long. However, a quarter of an hour passed. 2 hours passed. The situation on Chu Liwei's side was still the same. The gap between the two sides was constantly shrinking. Wei Zhe gradually became impatient. He wanted to control the dark purple hammer in front of him to speed up the devouring of Tianlei, but he knew it was impossible. After all, this thing was not under his control. Thinking of this, Wei Zhe took a deep breath. In any case, there was no time limit for this match. He did not believe that Chu Liwei could keep doing this. Shui flew back from Tianlei Sea and arrived at Rong Xiu's feet. It stretched and licked its claws before lying down in satisfaction. One could vaguely see a few silver snake-like streams of light flashing across its snow-white fur. The aura around its body was also much stronger than before. It could be seen that after this trip, it had devoured a lot of energy, and its strength had greatly increased. I haven't been this happy in a long time. Shui squinted her eyes and started to feel sleepy. Rong Xiu glanced at it. After devouring so much energy in one go, it would take some time for Shui to completely digest it and convert it into its own energy. Rong Xiu raised his wrist slightly, and his slender fingers moved gently in the air. A golden stream of light flew out and quickly formed a small barrier around Shui's body. With the protection of this barrier, Shui could completely block out external disturbances and focus on cultivating. Shui made another sound in its throat, and its icy blue eyes shone. Woo woo woo, I'm so touched. I can finally feel Master's warmth. However, Rong Xiu's next sentence mercilessly dealt it a heavy blow. Your bloodline is not as good as dumplings. This is already the limit. Just rest well for the time being. Shui was confused. Master, are you hinting that I'm not as good as dumpling? Rong Xiu's voice was cold. No, it's clear. Shui was speechless. It knew that it was harder than ascending to the heavens to hear a compliment from Master. Shui looked at Dumpling with resentment. At this moment, she was still running happily in the sea of lightning, as if she would never be tired. Actually, even among ancient divine beasts, there were very few who could be like Dumpling. The Tianlei here contained extremely strong energy. Those who were not strong enough would probably not be able to withstand the raging energy. However, Dumpling did not. She had a pure bloodline and had already opened her 5th meridian. This energy basically could not cause her any harm. She had an extremely strong physical body and great potential. That was why she could move freely in this sea of lightning. Shui hesitated for a long time. Although it did not want to admit it, Dumpling was indeed much stronger than it in this aspect. If you want to win, it's not impossible. Rong Xiu's lips moved slightly. Shui immediately looked up excitedly and met its master's deep eyes. A sense of uneasiness welled up in its heart. The next moment, it heard Rong Xiu say casually, "Just go to the Red Moon Desert a few more times." Oh! I knew it. Shui closed its eyes and decided to play dead. Time passed slowly. The competition between the two had finally reached its climax. Seeing that Wei Zhe and Chu Liwei were still running, the crowd had complicated expressions. There was really something wrong with these two. Otherwise, they would not have been able to fight until now. Shang Guanyu is catching up, right? I think it won't be long before she overtakes him. She is indeed very fast now, but Wei Zhe is not to be trifled with. Didn't you notice that from the beginning until now, the speed at which he devoured Tianlei was the same? There was no fluctuation at all? Now that you mention it, it does seem like, TSK, this is not right, right? No matter what, it can't be so stable. If there was no problem, he would have been defeated long ago. How could he have lasted until now? I think it's not that he's powerful, but that his hammer is extraordinary. But that's just a venerable artifact. I wonder how he did it? All kinds of discussions could be heard one after another. Sheng Guanjing's gaze kept wandering between the two of them. Every time he looked at Wei Zhe, he would frown. The current situation was that everyone knew that there was something wrong with Wei Zhe's hammer, but they did not know what the problem was. He had been observing for a long time, but he still did not find anything unusual. It was as if his hammer was a bottomless pit. Thinking of this, Sheng Guanjing became even more worried. Although Chu Luiyue had been chasing after him quickly, it had consumed a lot of her energy. What if the competition was still not over after the Great Green Sun Axe and the venerable artifact were full? He could tell that she really wanted to win. At this moment, Wei Zhe suddenly moved. He cut his palm, and a stream of red blood flew out and landed on the purplish-black hammer. For a moment, the wind whistled. Remember the mobile version of the website. Chapter 2069. His sudden action shocked everyone. Because it was too sudden. For such a long time, no matter what happened, Wei Zhe had always been very calm. No one expected him to suddenly attack at this time. Could it be that he's anxious because he's about to be caught? Many people guessed. This was also the most reasonable explanation. The warm blood landed on the hammer and was absorbed in the blink of an eye, leaving no trace behind. Then, the patterns on it seemed to light up a little. An astonishing aura spread out from it. The Tianlei above seemed to be summoned by some kind of power and began to surge over quickly, gradually forming a silver vortex. And Wei Zhe was at the center. No, to be precise, it was the hammer in front of him. Chu Luiyue also placed a holy artifact in front of her, but the feeling they gave off was very different. On Chu Luiyue's side, everyone could clearly feel that she was the one who activated these holy artifacts and venerable artifacts, attracting the Tianlei. On the other hand, Wei Zhe's side, it was more like the hammer itself was attracting the Tianlei to fall one after another. Wei Zhe's presence seemed to be somewhat dispensable, wind and thunder rolled. This commotion also alarmed Chu Luiyue. She turned her head and narrowed her eyes dangerously. At this moment, Wei Zhe's condition was very strange. His face was very pale and large beads of sweat fell from his forehead. There was also a trace of blood slowly seeping out from the corner of his mouth, which he quickly wiped away. The aura on his body was also much weaker than before. In the eyes of others, perhaps it was because he had suddenly erupted and used all the power in his body to trigger the Tianlei. However, Chu Luiyue did not think so. Because Wei Zhe's appearance was not purely due to the exhaustion of origin power and spirit. Chu Luiyue's gaze turned slightly and looked at the hammer in front of him thoughtfully. For some reason, she felt that Wei Zhe was the one being controlled, Family Wei Master. Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her mouth and called out to him. Wei Zhe did not seem to hear her and did not react. His eyes were still fixed on the hammer in front of him. Family Wei Master? Chu Luiyue's voice rose a little. This time, Wei Zhe finally turned his head. Chu Luiyue's heart sank. Wei Zhe's face was as pale as a ghost, and his aura and spirit were very dispirited. Compared to before, he was like a completely different person. Furthermore, all of this was because he had cut open his palm and left a trace of blood on the hammer. What shocked and worried her the most was Wei's eyes. When he first turned his head and looked at her, his eyes were lifeless, as if they were shrouded in a thick layer of fog. Although his expression quickly returned to normal and only a deep fatigue was left in his eyes, Chu Luiyue still felt that something was wrong. Family Wei Master, I return all the words you said to me just now. Although the competition is important, your health is the most important thing. Chu Luiyue said word by word. A trace of anger and resentment appeared in Wei Zhe's eyes, but he did not say anything. He only turned his head and ignored her. This time, Chu Luiyue was even more certain of her guess. However, what she did not understand was that if she could sense that something was wrong, then Tang Ku could as well. But why didn't he say anything until now? More and more people from Tianlei flocked to Wei Zhe. Chu Luiyue had finally evened the score with great difficulty. Now that Wei Zhe suddenly made such a move, the gap between them widened again. Seeing the situation change again, the onlookers unconsciously quieted down and waited with bated breath. They could all see that both of them had used their last trump cards. The winner or loser would be revealed soon. Shengguan Jing slowly clenched his fists. The key to the problem now was not only that Wei Zhe was faster than Chu Luiyue in devouring Tianlei, but more importantly, Wei Zhe had already started to snatch Tianlei. The people from Tianlei, who were originally flocking to Chu Luiyue, seemed to be attracted by some kind of power on Wei Zhe's side. They all changed their direction and went straight there. On Chu Luiyue's side, the number of people from Tianlei was getting smaller and smaller. Even if she could still hold on, if she couldn't compete with Wei Zhe, the result would be the same. Shengguan Jing wasn't the only one who noticed this. Many of the blacksmiths who were watching the battle also noticed this. I didn't expect Wei Zhe to be so powerful. He actually managed to snatch Tianlei from Shengguanyu. If this goes on, he will monopolize the market. When that happens, Shengguanyu will definitely lose. Usually, when two people fight for Tianlei, one of them has to be much stronger than the other to be able to do so. However, Wei Zhe's strength isn't the best in this aspect. Moreover, Shengguanyu has several divine artifacts. How can this be? No wonder Wei Zhe was so arrogant just now. It turns out that he has such a powerful trump card. This time, he is going to win. Even if Shengguanyu has a divine artifact, it will be difficult for them to compete with him. All kinds of noises entered her ears. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze and gently closed her eyes. Of course, she understood what they were talking about. At this moment, the Tianlei was no longer surging toward her. Even the Sun Great Axe and the other weapons were still holding back. If this went on, she naturally couldn't. After pondering for a moment, she raised her hand, and with a thought, she recalled all the items in front of her. Soon, there was only emptiness left around her. When the crowd saw this, they subconsciously fell silent. Is she going to admit defeat? Taking drastic measures to deal with the situation. Family Wei is really powerful, Chu Luiyue said. Wei Zhe looked over again with a strange smile on his face. It's not too late to admit defeat. Chu Luiyue smiled and ignored his words. She only clapped her hands, dusted off the dust on her body, and looked up. What I hate the most in my life is when people rob me of my things. Her voice was very soft, as if it would be blown away by the wind at any moment. Family Wei, since that's the case, why don't we have a bet and see who will be the winner? Wei Zhe was stunned and immediately frowned. You're not mine, right? In the next moment, the woman suddenly tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and flew out like an arrow leaving the bow. She headed straight for the endless sea of lightning. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2070. This action immediately caused everyone to be greatly shocked. Is she crazy? She actually wants to barge into the Thunder Sea? Those Tianlei contain extremely shocking power. She's really not afraid of death by doing this. Wei Zhe just used his hand to grab it before and was directly burned. She's really bold to rush in rashly. I guess she's unhappy that those Tianlei were forcefully taken away by Wei Zhe? She's indeed quite capable, but she's still young and frivolous. That Thunder Sea is no different from a place of life and death for human cultivators. Does she think that she can freely travel through it like a crimson gold sky phoenix? Obviously, everyone was very pessimistic about Chu Luiyue's actions. Some people secretly shook their heads as if they had already seen the result. The few people standing beside Shengguan Jing couldn't help but ask in a low voice, Shengguan Jing, are you really not worried at all? Shengguan Jing's face was expressionless, and no one could tell what he was thinking at this time. Hearing this, he paused and said, never does anything that she's not confident in. Courting death? He didn't think so. She must have her own reasons for daring to do this. I believe in her. In the eyes of the surrounding people, Shengguan Jing's words were just stubborn. After all, she was his most beloved junior. How could he really not be worried? This was not Peach Blossom Dock, where she could do whatever she wanted. They couldn't see anything from Shengguan Jing's expression. Some people turned their eyes slightly and looked at Rong Xiu. At this moment, he was looking up, and his thin scarlet lips were slightly raised. His smooth jawline was raised like a jade carving. There seemed to be waves surging in his phoenix-like eyes that were as deep as the sea. From afar, not only was he not worried at all, he seemed to be quite interested. Needless to say, this person seemed to be more ambitious than Shang Guanjing. Many people looked at each other. It was probably because Chu Luiyue defeated Yi Wentao previously, which made them extremely confident in Chu Luiyue. So much so that they even felt that Chu Luiyue could easily deal with such a situation. After the initial shock, Wei Zhe quickly regained his senses. His pale and colorless lips were tightly pursed. His eyes were cold, and there was a hint of cold ridicule at the corners of his eyes. Insolence. It was true that she had contracted the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix, but that didn't mean that she had the same amazing physical strength as the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. In the previous battle with Yi Wentao, it was said that to a large extent, he had relied on the two contracted mythical beasts to achieve victory. As for herself, in the end, he was only a high deity. How could a mortal body resist this endless Tianlei? Wei Zhe looked up and sneered, waiting for Chu Luiyue to return in defeat. Countless pairs of eyes were also focused on that figure at this moment. Chu Luiyue flew into the air and stood in the middle. Countless heavenly lightning bolts slowly drifted across the surroundings. Layers of oppressive might spread out from it, making it hard for everyone to breathe. Chu Luiyue's figure was inconspicuous and extremely small here. Her figure was slender and slightly frail. It was as if any bolt of heavenly lightning could easily pierce through her. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and looked at the Tianlei flowing around her. These heavenly thunders would dodge on their own. As long as one didn't take the initiative, one wouldn't be injured. Previously, Wei Zhe's palm was burned when he reached out to touch the Tianlei out of curiosity. After the others present saw that he had learned his lesson, they all acted carefully and the same thing didn't happen again. However, if this continued, these Tianlei would all be snatched away by Wei Zhe. So, she had to come. Chu Luiyue made up her mind and reached out. Countless people held their breaths and didn't blink, afraid that they would miss something. Chu Luiyue grabbed a Tianlei in her hand. For a moment, sparks flew everywhere. However, just when everyone thought that Chu Luiyue was going to be injured, they saw that her expression didn't change and her heart didn't beat faster. It was as if she wasn't affected at all. Then, she exerted force in her hand, and the Tianlei shattered into countless fine streams of light that surged into her body one after another. Tianlei was crushed and devoured by her bare hands just like that. Everyone was stunned. What's going on? Not only did the Tianlei not cause her any harm, but it also turned into her own power? No. What's that in her hand? Someone in the crowd suddenly shouted. Everyone looked over instinctively and saw that there seemed to be a dazzling light flickering in Chu Luiyue's hand. That's a divine body? Wei Zhe suddenly realized something. His eyes widened in shock, and his face was full of disbelief. Many people reacted when they heard him say that. That's right. Other than a divine body, what else could help her block that terrifying Tianlei? Upon closer inspection, Chu Luiyue's body was indeed covered by a layer of dazzling soft armor. She floated in midair, and her body was glowing faintly. She was so small in the sea of lightning, yet so dazzling. She was like a twinkling star that couldn't be ignored. A divine body? There are so many divine bodies in the world. Why don't I have any impression of her? Yeah, I've been looking at her for a while, but I can't remember what kind of divine body she cultivated. Dazzling light, soft armor, this? Wait, could it be? Someone seemed to have guessed something but felt that it was too ridiculous. He hesitated and didn't dare to say anything. At that moment, Chu Luiyue raised her hand again and grabbed at the second Tianlei. Although they had used up a lot of their energy earlier, there were too many Tianlei here. Especially since Chu Luiyue was at the center, the density was extremely high. All she needed to do was to reach out her hand, and all the Tianlei would be within her reach. This saved her a lot of trouble. Bang! The second bolt of heavenly lightning shattered in her hand. She was very fast. In a short while, she had dealt with 7 or 8 Tianlei around her. The energy around her had also increased by a lot. Sensing that the force in her body was quickly recovering, Chu Liwei curled her lips slightly. If I knew it would be so convenient, I wouldn't have wasted so much energy before. Using the sacred artifact to activate the Tianlei had consumed a lot of her energy and spirit. Doing it directly could instead replenish her energy. What a loss, what a loss. Fortunately, she had realized it in time. Otherwise, it would have been a huge loss. As she thought of this, she lowered her head and waved at Wei Zhe. Family Wei, thank you. If he had not forced her to this extent, she would not have realized this. As she spoke, she was still holding onto a Tianlei, which was shining brightly. Wei Zhe felt a stinging pain in his eyes, his heart, and his entire body. Shangguan, you don't go overboard. Chu Liwei crushed the Tianlei in her hand and smiled casually. Family Wei, how am I going overboard? Weren't you the one who snatched it from me first? If I had any other choice, I wouldn't have done this, right? Wei Zhe almost spat out a mouthful of blood. So it was all his fault. But no matter what, he was not going overboard, right? This was equivalent to directly plundering the heavenly lightning from the source. Chu Liwei quickly swept through the area. How was this enough? Chu Liwei took a step forward. Almost at the same time, the Tianlei in front of her took a step back. Chu Liwei paused. She raised her eyebrows and smiled faintly. Hey, why are you hiding? Wonderful book room. Chapter 2071. She waved her hand. Come here. The Tianlei in front of her didn't move. There was a hint of coldness in her eyes. I said come here. When the crowd below saw this scene, they were all at a loss. What's Shangguan Yu doing? I think she's greeting the Tianlei? Are you kidding me? It's true. Didn't you see that the Tianlei retreated a little when she went forward? I don't know why, but I feel that the Tianlei are a little afraid of her. Hearing this, everyone's first reaction was that it was ridiculous and unbelievable. They had only heard that people were in awe of the Tianlei. When had they ever heard that the Tianlei were afraid of people? Wasn't this too ridiculous? However, the situation above seemed to be a little strange. Just as everyone was doubting it, they saw a silver snake-like Tianlei move forward hesitantly. Chu Liwei raised her hand and easily grabbed the Tianlei in her hand. Her red lips curled up, revealing a satisfied smile. Be obedient. After she finished speaking, she moved her finger, and the heavenly thunder instantly exploded. It turned into countless tiny streams of light that surged into her body. Continue. She raised her eyebrows slightly and moved her finger. Then, everyone saw a scene that they would never forget in their lives. In the Tianlei Sea, the slender and exquisite woman floated in the air. The Tianlei seemed to be lining up, moving forward one after another and landing in her hand. Then, they exploded one after another, and the astonishing power contained in them all surged into her body. In a short period of time, the aura around her had risen rapidly, and it showed no signs of stopping. This scene that was beyond their understanding shocked everyone present. They couldn't recover from their shock for a long time. They couldn't be blamed for making a fuss. This kind of scene was too rare. No matter how hard they racked their brains, they couldn't imagine that when Chu Liwei said, snatch, she was really snatching it with her bare hands. Shangguan Jing's tightly clenched hands slowly relaxed, and he secretly let out a long sigh of relief. This girl's trump card was really strong. The corners of Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly as he shook his head helplessly. Even the corners of his eyes carried a doting smile. She was even more playful than Dumpling. In fact, with her strength, she could have directly devoured all of these Tianlei. However, she wanted them to line up and step forward one by one. This was obviously done on purpose for the people below to see. Rong Xiu turned to look at Wei Zhe. At this moment, he was looking up with a dazed expression. Head of family Wei. Rong Xiu suddenly spoke. Wei Zhe was startled. He turned around to look. The shock in his eyes had yet to fade. Clearly, Chu Liu's move had far exceeded his expectations. Rong Xiu raised his chin and said in a low and pleasant voice, is about to catch up. Why aren't you moving faster? Wei Zhe's face instantly turned green and white. It was very interesting. Of course, he knew this. Did he need others to remind him? Now that Rong Xiu said all this, it was obvious that he was purposely taunting her. Wei Zhe took a deep breath and suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. He said coldly, Head Yu's strength is indeed outstanding. However, I'm a little worried. With Head Yu's current level, if you forcefully devour too many Tianlei, I'm afraid your body won't be able to. Looks like head of family Wei doesn't know. Rong Xiu interrupted him with a smile. Yu's divine body was formed by devouring the god-destroying tribulation. Although these Tianlei are fierce, they should be slightly inferior to the god-destroying tribulation, right? If you have the time to worry about why don't you think about what you're going to do if you lose this round? Wei Zhe's pupils shrank. A trace of deep shock flashed across his eyes. After a short moment of dead silence, gasps of cold air sounded one after another. God-destroying tribulation? Wasn't that something that could only be summoned by a venerable god expert? Furthermore, only those at the very top would be able to achieve this. Those who could successfully pass the god-destroying tribulation were even rarer. In the Divine Ruins world, it had been too long since anyone had summoned the god-destroying tribulation. However, Rong Xiu actually said that not only did Chu Luiyue summon it, he even used it as an opportunity to refine his divine body. Many people's first reaction was disbelief. However, Rong Xiu's expression was calm and there was even a smile at the corner of his lips. How did he look like he was lying? Moreover, whether this was true or not, they would know after trying it out. Now that Chu Luiyue was in the Sea of Lightning and could easily devour the Tianlei, wasn't it enough to explain everything? Gorgeous soft armor. It's really the god-destroying tribulation. Someone couldn't help but murmur in shock. Most of the people present were the top blacksmiths, so they more or less had some understanding of the god-destroying tribulation. At this moment, looking at Chu Luiyue and her performance before and after, what was there to doubt? How powerful was the god-destroying tribulation? Compared to these Tianlei, it was more than just a little bit better. Chu Luiyue could even deal with it, let alone these? No wonder she was able to defeat Yi Wentao. With such a divine body, his combat strength is indeed comparable to a venerable god. Naturally, she could easily snatch all of these Tianlei. At this moment, the one who felt the most uncomfortable was Wei Zhe. Chu Luiyue's actions were equivalent to directly cutting off his path to Tianlei. As long as a Tianlei wanted to come towards him, Chu Luiyue would quickly move and devour it before he could. The key was that she did it directly, simple and fast. Straightforward and efficient. She didn't even give him time to react. In a short while, all of the Tianlei were intercepted, and the sky above Wei Zhe was empty. At this moment, Chu Luiyue didn't seem unable to withstand the power of the Tianlei. In fact, she seemed to be in better spirits. She only needed to focus on that battle, and the surrounding Tianlei would continuously fall into her hands and become her power. Wei Zhe's body trembled, and something seemed to be surging wildly in his chest. Finally, he couldn't help but stand up. At this moment, the number of Tianlei that Chu Luiyue had devoured had already surpassed his. More importantly, as long as she continued to snatch Tianlei, he wouldn't be able to get a single Tianlei. What was the point of continuing this competition? Seeing his actions, Chu Luiyue stopped as well. What, is the head of the family Wei admitting defeat? She asked with a smile. Wei Zhe's throat was filled with a thick stench of blood, but he forced it back down. He spoke with difficulty. You are ruthless. This time you win. He had exhausted all the energy in his body, and he couldn't continue. If he forced it, he would probably die here today. He wanted to obtain Tang Ku's inheritance, but he wanted to live even more. Chu Luiyue's smile deepened. Head of the family Wei, thank you for letting me win. Wei Zhe didn't want to say another word to Chu Luiyue. He reached out his hand, intending to put away the purple-black hammer. However, at this moment, a reddish-gold figure suddenly flew past him and snatched the hammer away. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2072. Wei Zhe was shocked and quickly looked up. The one who did it was none other than Dumpling. Previously, she had been wandering around, so Wei Zhe didn't take her seriously. In addition, all his attention was on Chu Luiyue. In a moment of carelessness, Dumpling took advantage of the loophole. At this moment, Dumpling was holding the hammer in her hand and sizing it up seriously. She knocked it with her hand and sniffed it with her nose. Her face was full of curiosity and inquiry. Wei Zhe was scared out of his wits. He immediately pointed at Dumpling and shouted in a trembling voice. "What are you doing? Hurry up and return this old man's things." Dumpling grinned. "What's the hurry? I just felt that this thing was a little strange and wanted to take a look at it. I'll return it to you later." As she spoke, she looked at the hammer in her hand with a puzzled expression. This thing wasn't heavy. At a glance, it didn't look any different from an ordinary hammer. There seemed to be some patterns engraved on it, but she couldn't understand it. Boom! A cluster of flames burned in Dumpling's hand and quickly surrounded the hammer. Wei Zhe's eyes almost rolled back, and he almost fainted. This time, he was so angry that he couldn't speak. Shangguan Yu, don't go too far." This crimson gold heavenly phoenix was her contracted fiend. If she hadn't secretly instructed it, this crimson gold heavenly phoenix wouldn't have suddenly attacked. Chu Luiyue finally flew down from the sea of lightning and came to Dumpling's side. She touched Dumpling's round hair bun, then looked up at Wei Zhe and smiled. "Family Wei, why are you so nervous? Dumpling is still a child. It's inevitable that she's curious and wants to play. Don't mind her taking your things. After all, we can't snatch your things in front of so many people, right?" Wei Zhe was furious. Now that the item was in their hands, how could this not be considered robbery? "That belongs to this old man. You are already offending him. Shangguan Yu, this old man has already admitted defeat. What else do you want?" Chu Luiyue blinked. "Family Wei, you've misunderstood me. I really don't want to do anything. After all, this belongs to you, doesn't it? Dumpling, hurry up and return the things to the family Wei." Dumpling seemed a little regretful when she heard this, but she still nodded obediently. She grabbed the hammer with both hands and handed it over to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue took the item. The flames on it also dissipated, revealing its original appearance. Chu Luiyue looked down and sized him up, raising his eyebrows slightly. The flames of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix were unable to leave any marks on it. It was not even able to detect any abnormalities. This was the most unusual thing. Even the best refined iron in the world would not remain unchanged after being tossed around by Dumpling. Moreover, the material of this hammer was only above average. Dumpling tugged at Chu Luiyue's sleeve. A trace of regret flashed across her grape-like big eyes. There was really something wrong with this item. However, she could not figure out what was going on even after looking at it for a while. Chu Luiyue pinched her little face and then handed her the hammer. "Family Wei, your item." Wei Zhe was about to step forward when Chu Luiyue suddenly took back the item. He raised his eyebrows and said with a half-smile, "I'm not going to lie to you. To tell you the truth, I'm also very curious about this treasure of yours. Previously, I had used 3 sacred weapons and 8 Dozun stage divine weapons. However, you only relied on this iron hammer to firmly suppress me. This thing of yours is simply more powerful than a sacred weapon." Wei Zhe's heart skipped a beat. "No matter what, that's my business. It has nothing to do with you." "How can it have nothing to do with me? You almost defeated me with this item. I'm just curious. It doesn't seem like a big deal to ask a few more questions, right?" As Chu Luiyue spoke, he held the hammer in his hand and weighed it in his hand. He seemed to be eager to give it a try. "Although the Thousand Peaks halberd did not recognize you as its master, why would you care about those things when you have such a treasure?" Wei Zhe was furious and immediately attacked. A few silver needles flew out. They instantly enveloped Chu Luiyue. The two of them were very close to each other. Wei Zhe's attack came without any warning. Chu Luiyue had just heard the sound of the air being torn apart. When he looked over, he saw that the silver needles had already flown to his eyes. There was no way to avoid them. At this moment, A golden barrier suddenly condensed in front of him. Clang, 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 clang. The silver needles were blocked. After a series of clanging sounds, they were crushed into powder by the terrifying pressure of the barrier before they could fall to the ground. They disappeared in an instant. Wei Zhe sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at the tall figure that had appeared in front of Chu Luiwei out of nowhere. Rong Xiu's strength was already so powerful. Family Wei clan leader. You attacked without a word. Isn't your temper a little too impatient? Rong Xiu spoke slowly, but his voice was cold. You're in such a hurry. Are you worried that we will snatch your item in public? Or do you have something that can't be seen? As soon as Rong Xiu finished speaking, Wei Zhe was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He retorted harshly. Rong Xiu, don't make irresponsible remarks. Chu Liuyue's eyes suddenly focused. Rong Xiu tilted his head. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment, raised his eyes to look at him, and handed the hammer over. Take a look. The aura inside was inexplicably familiar. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2073. Rong Xiu took the item. The moment he touched the hammer, he raised his eyebrows and narrowed his eyes. Seeing his reaction, Chu Luiyue was even more certain of his guess. Rong Xiu was silent for a moment, then he looked up. The two of them looked at each other for a moment, and they both knew what the other was thinking. The aura inside, it was very similar. Wei Zhe's eyes were fixed on the two of them, and his back was already drenched in sweat. The two of them were very cunning. Could it be that they had really discovered something? Just as he was feeling extremely nervous, Rong Xiu suddenly walked over with the hammer. Wei Zhe held his breath. Rong Xiu's every step felt like he was stepping on his heart. Soon, Rong Xiu stood a step away from Wei Zhe. Then, he handed the item over with a relaxed expression and chuckled. Why are you so nervous, Family Wei Master? I'll return it to you. Wei Zhe looked at him suspiciously. After confirming that he was not joking, he reached out and took the hammer. The moment the item fell into his hands, his heart, which had been hanging in the air, finally settled down. However, Rong Xiu's next sentence immediately made him nervous again. Oh right, I suddenly thought of something. Why haven't I seen Family Wei Master on the way here? Young Family Wei Master was Wei Shiping. Back then, he had colluded with outsiders to frame Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu, and was expelled from Lingxiao College. Since then, Wei Shiping had never appeared again. Now that Rong Xiu suddenly mentioned him, many people did not even realize who he was talking about. Wei Zhe's heart sank. He unconsciously clenched the hammer in his hand and quickly glanced at Rong Xiu. But Rong Xiu's eyes were as deep as the sea, and his expression was calm and indifferent. Nothing could be seen. Wei Zhe said reluctantly, Why are you suddenly asking this? Rong Xiu said, It's nothing. I just thought of him when I saw you. Family Wei Master? Can't answer? Wei Zhe paused for a moment. There's nothing hard to answer. It had disappeared ever since he left Lingxiao College. We also know where he is now. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. He's your son. Although he did make a mistake back then, he didn't deserve to die. I didn't expect you to be so heartless. Wei Zhe frowned and said coldly, He did something wrong and disgraced my family Wei. This is what he should bear. How can you talk about being heartless? It seemed that he was still angry at the mention of Wei Shiping. I see. Rong Xiu's face showed a trace of regret. What a pity. I heard that you originally thought highly of him as the successor of the Family Wei Master. Wei Zhe's face was livid. Obviously, he didn't want to talk about it anymore. He turned and left. When he left, he put away the hammer. Rong Xiu looked at his back meaningfully, but didn't say anything more. Tang Ku's voice came again. Congratulations. You won. This voice immediately attracted everyone's attention. Chu Luiyue raised her head slightly, her red lips curling. Thank you, Senior Tang Ku. Tang Ku said, My inheritance is behind one of the 10 bronze doors. Now you can choose one. If you can choose it, everything will be yours. If you can't, you can only blame yourself for not being fated to be with me. Everyone looked at each other. They thought that after winning this round, Chu Luiwei could directly get Tang Ke's inheritance. Who knew that they would have to choose again? Choosing 1 out of 10, the probability was too low. Chu Luiwei didn't seem surprised. She smiled and nodded gently. Okay. She knew that Tang Ke wouldn't give everything away so easily, so it was normal for her to set this up. Tang Ke was quite surprised to see her agree so readily. You agreed so readily. Aren't you worried that you'll make the wrong choice and end up with nothing? Chu Luiwei shook her head and smiled in relief. I've done all I can. As for whether I'll have this opportunity, it's up to God. No matter what the result is, I have no regrets. Tang Ke paused for a moment, then suddenly laughed. Haha, you're quite interesting, girl. Good. Now, I'll clear the field for you. You choose. As soon as she finished speaking, a powerful force swept over and went straight for everyone. Immediately after, they felt as if they were being pulled by something, and everything before their eyes instantly turned dark. Chu Luiwei turned around. The huge space became empty, and she was the only one left. Oh no, Rong Xiu was also there. Chu Luiwei narrowed her eyes. Tang Ke's voice sounded again. You're Rong Xiu, right? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. Although you didn't participate in the competition just now, the halberd of 10,000 peaks has recognized you as its master. After all, it was made by me personally. For its sake, I'll give you a chance. After this girl chooses, you can also choose once. Rong Xiu cupped his fists. Thank you, Senior Tang Ke. Chu Luiwei touched her chin. Tisk. To think that she had worked so hard to get such an opportunity. However, Rong Xiu was so easy to get. From the beginning to the end, he didn't seem to have done anything. His luck was really incomparable. Girl, you go first. Chu Luiwei stopped thinking and looked at the 10 doors around her. Every door was exactly the same, and she couldn't see any difference. If it were someone else, she would have taken a gamble. Unfortunately, she wasn't. With a thought, the armillary shield appeared in her hand. Clang. The armillary shield fell to the ground, and several cracks spread on the ground. At this moment, it seemed that the entire space trembled. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2074. I'm blind. Why don't I let the armillary shield help me choose? As Chu Luiwei spoke, she placed one hand on the armillary shield. She held her breath and focused, injecting a stream of force into it. Buzz. In the next moment, a faint blue stream of light appeared on the armillary shield. The mysterious runes engraved on it also seemed even more mysterious under the illumination of the faint glow. Chu Luiwei waited quietly. However, after a quarter of an hour, the armillary shield did not react at all. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. When she was outside the door, she clearly felt the armillary shield fluctuate. Why was it now? She waited for a while, but there was still no change. The armillary shield did not help her choose. Tang Ke's voice sounded faintly. You're really smart, girl. Unfortunately, although the armillary shield can sense my presence, it can't help you choose. You should do it yourself. Chu Luiwei paused. Her fingers slowly swept across the secret runes on the armillary shield, and a look of deep thought flashed across her eyes. The bronze door knocker had a similar pattern. It was definitely not a coincidence. However, for some reason, the armillary shield seemed to be suppressed by some force here. Although the feeling was very subtle, she could still tell. Tang Ke seemed to not want her to use the armillary shield. Countless thoughts flashed through Chu Luiwei's mind, but her face remained calm. After a short hesitation, she finally raised her head. Okay. Tang Ke asked her to choose, so she would choose. At the same time, outside the tomb, Sheng Guanjing only felt that the world was spinning. After about 15 minutes, the surrounding darkness gradually faded. When his feet stepped on the ground again, Sheng Guanjing heaved a sigh of relief. He immediately looked around and saw a tightly shut door. It was the door that Chu Luiwei had opened and let them in. At this moment, the door was locked. The bronze door knocker shook twice and stopped. Everything seemed to have returned to its original state. All kinds of voices came from behind. It was the group of people who had been sent out at the same time. At this moment, they had all woken up. Everyone looked at each other in dismay and quickly understood they had been sent back to the stone forest by Tang Ku. Are we out? Why isn't Shangguan Yu online? She's going to receive Senior Tang Ku's inheritance, so of course she's not here. Didn't Senior Tang Ku say that she was the only one left there? When she came out, the entire Divine Ruins world would probably change, right? This was not an exaggeration. Tang Ku was the undisputed top refiner in the Divine Ruins world. Whoever could inherit his mantle would almost certainly have a successful future. With his favor, Chu Luiwei was very likely to break through and become a refining saint in the future. At that time, her identity would really be different. And the appearance of a weapon refining saint could naturally change the current situation of the entire Divine Ruins. What was more, there was also Shangguan Jing, who was quite appreciated by Tang Ku, who wasn't extremely envious. Her luck is truly heaven-defying. However, this result was obtained from their competition. She had won fair and square, so the others couldn't say anything. Wei Zhe looked around vigilantly and suddenly realized that something was wrong. Where's Rong Xiu? The few people standing beside him were all his followers. When they heard this, they hurriedly looked around. In the end, they couldn't find Rong Xiu's figure even after searching for a while. There were only so many people in total. As long as they looked around, they could tell who was there and who wasn't. Furthermore, a person like Rong Xiu was too conspicuous. Even if he stood among countless people, he could still be seen with a glance. Patriarch, he really doesn't seem to be here. Wei Zhe suddenly realized something and frowned. He looked at the door and cried out in shock. He was also left inside? The news that Rong Xiu didn't come out with everyone quickly spread. Everyone was filled with doubts. After thinking about it, they could only blame it on the Thousand Peaks halberd. After all, it was a sacred artifact that Tang Ke had personally refined. It was normal that he would look at Rong Xiu differently. After thinking about this, Wei Zhe secretly gritted his teeth and brooded over this matter. The Thousand Peaks halberd belonged to him from the start. If Rong Xiu hadn't suddenly appeared and snatched it away, he would be the one left inside now. Wei Zhe was burning with anger. His blood and qi churned, and he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Patriarch! The few people beside him hurriedly came to help him. Get lost! Wei Zhe pushed them away with an ugly expression. He found a place to sit down alone and consumed a pill to adjust his breathing and recover from his injuries. He looked down at his palm. The cut from before had already scabbed over, leaving only a faint mark. He gritted his teeth and closed his eyes. Fortunately, I wasn't discovered. Shangguan Jing narrowed his eyes and sized up Wei Zhe. After a while, he retracted his gaze and fell into deep thought. Obviously, there was something wrong with Wei Zhe. Previously, when they were inside, Rong Xiu suddenly asked about Wei Shiping. Obviously, it wasn't a coincidence. At that time, Shangguan Jing had been by Chu Liyue's side, so he also had an impression of this name. Could it be that the secret of the hammer was also related to it? Shangguan Jing rubbed the space between his eyebrows. Now was obviously not a good time to ask. It was better to wait until Yu and Rong Xiu came out from inside. Silence. Chu Liyue stood in the middle and slowly glanced at the 10 doors. She couldn't tell where Tang Ke's voice came from, and she couldn't be sure which door the fluctuation on the celestial shield had sensed the existence behind. Therefore, she could only choose blindly. After a while, Chu Liyue raised her hand and pointed at the door on the left in the middle. Senior Tang Ke, I choose this. Once you make a choice, you can't regret it. I'll ask you again. Are you sure? I'm sure. Tang Ke paused for a moment and suddenly laughed. Good. Since you've made up your mind, then just go forward and push the door open. Chu Liyue composed herself and stepped forward. After taking a step, she suddenly stopped and turned to look at Rong Xiu beside her. She remembered that Tang Ke had said that after she made her choice, Rong Xiu would also have the same chance. She wanted to know which one Rong Xiu had chosen. Why don't you choose first, and then we'll set off together? Before Rong Xiu had time to speak, Tang Ke's voice sounded again. No. He can only choose after you go in. Chu Liyue wrinkled her nose. This famous senior Tang Ku was indeed powerful, but there were too many rules, yes. Although she also knew that the two of them had different choices and it should be difficult for them to meet after going in, she was just a little curious. She didn't expect that even this was not allowed. Rong Xiu laughed and walked over to hold her hand. His slightly calloused fingers gently slid across her palm, causing her to tremble slightly. He wrapped his long arms around her and pulled her into his arms. The light cold fragrance instantly surrounded Chu Luiyue. He put his chin on her forehead and rubbed it gently. His voice was low. "Don't worry. I'll find you as soon as possible." Chu Luiyue nodded subconsciously, then looked up at him and smiled. "We've chosen different doors. If you find me, I'm afraid it's not convenient. Anyway, we'll probably come back in the end. Why don't we meet here?" There seemed to be a dark light in Rong Xiu's eyes, and his thin scarlet lips curved slightly. He would never refuse her request. "Then I'll go first." Chu Luiyue blinked, then turned and walked toward the door she had chosen. This place was spacious and empty. However, after swallowing the Tianlei, she had recovered a lot of her strength, so she was quite fast. In a short while, she arrived at the door. Taking a deep breath, she finally raised her hand and placed it on the bronze door. It was cold to the touch, rough and heavy. She exerted a little force. Creak! The door in front of her opened with a creak. A vicissitude and distant aura hit her in the face. It was as if she had opened a dusty box that had been sealed for many years. She could even smell a trace of the ancient smell from it. She focused her eyes and looked inside. It was pitch black. No one knew what was inside. Chu Luiyue composed herself and walked inside. Her figure quickly disappeared into the darkness. Bang! The bronze door closed again, completely blocking Rong Xiu's line of sight. The spacious space fell into silence again. Rong Xiu stared at the door for a while, then looked away. At this moment, the gentleness and affection in his eyes had completely disappeared. It was replaced by the usual coldness and solemnity. It was as if the mountains and rivers had frozen over 1,000 miles, and the cold air was awe-inspiring. The surrounding temperature seemed to have dropped a lot. After a while, his thin lips opened slightly. "Tang Ku, you're presumptuous. Wonderful book house." Chapter 2075. His voice was cold and low, like jade hitting each other, but it was also wrapped in an extremely terrifying pressure. As soon as he finished speaking, the ground under his feet was covered with a faint layer of white frost. A gust of wind swept over with cold air. Then, a translucent phantom appeared in front of Rong Xiu. It was a man who looked to be in his 30s, wearing a blue robe. He was tall and straight, and his handsome face could be vaguely seen. It was Tang Ku. If they did not see it with their own eyes, they would find it hard to believe that the legendary Tang Ku was so young. In fact, because of his outstanding talent, he had broken through the shackles long ago and became a supreme god expert. As a result, he maintained his figure and appearance from then on. Seeing that Rong Xiu was angry, a trace of deep fear flashed in his eyes. Then he clasped his hands and bowed respectfully to Rong Xiu. "I acted without authorization and led Master Yu into the wind separation cave. I hope your highness can forgive me." Rong Xiu looked at him coldly. "Yes, madam." Tang Ku suddenly came back to his senses and quickly bowed his head. "I misspoke. I almost forgot that your highness is now married." Rong Xiu took a step forward. The increasingly heavy pressure was almost unbearable for Tang Ku. Rong Xiu said coldly, "No matter which of these 10 doors she chooses, it will lead to the wind separation cave in the end. You want her to help you save people? But do you know how dangerous it is for her?" The question made Tang Ku's heart tremble violently. He gritted his teeth, lifted his clothes, and directly knelt down. "Your Highness, this subordinate understands all of what you've said. But I have no choice. 10,000 years have passed. I can't wait any longer." Even if he knew that doing so would make his highness angry, he had to do it. This was his only chance. Rong Xiu looked at him condescendingly. Tang Ku's head was on the ground and her hands were on the ground. She was almost unable to stand up because of this aura. After a long time, Rong Xiu turned around and walked towards the door that Chu Luiyue had just entered. Sensing the commotion, Tang Ke hurriedly dissuaded him. "Your Highness, you can't go to the wind separation cave now." Rong Xiu stopped in his tracks. He naturally knew this. If he forced his way in now, the situation would only worsen. "I will wait here." Rong Xiu stood in front of the door with one hand behind his back and a gloomy expression on his face. "If she returns unharmed, I will let bygones be bygones. But if she is hurt, Tang Ke, your 10,000 years of waiting will be in vain." Tang Ke's heart trembled, and then she let out a long breath, closed her eyes and kowtowed sincerely. "Thank you, Your Highness." Chu Luiyue was naturally unaware of the situation outside. After entering the bronze door, after a short period of darkness, there was a ray of light in front of her. Chu Luiyue calmed down and walked forward. After walking through a narrow passage, she found that there was a silver barrier at the end. As for the faint glow, it was coming from the barrier. Chu Luiyue looked carefully. The pressure on this barrier was extremely strong, but it didn't seem dangerous. She hesitated and stretched out her hand, but was surprised to find that her hand easily passed through the barrier. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes in surprise. She had never encountered such a situation before. After hesitating for a moment, she walked forward. As expected, her whole body passed through easily. Just as she was full of doubts, she was shocked by the scene in front of her. Behind the barrier was a completely different world. Looking ahead, it was a flat and wide field. Under the vast sky, 2 tombstones stood quietly. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2076. Loneliness, Loneliness, and Bleakness. These were the emotions that surged into Chu Luiyue's heart when she saw the 2 tombstones. Apart from these 2 tombstones, there was nothing else in the entire field. It was as if they had been standing here since an extremely long time ago. As if driven by some force, Chu Luiyue stepped forward. She frowned as soon as she took a step. In this place, he couldn't fly. This place was clearly not a normal natural world, but a unique small space. Do you want me to bring you there?" Dumpling's voice came from her heart. Chu Luiyue shook her head. No need. Even she was greatly suppressed, so Tuanzi might not be spared either. Anyway, there was nothing to be anxious about. She might as well walk over slowly. She suddenly thought of something and looked back. That silver barrier was like a flame, quickly burning away. In an instant, the void was empty. At this moment, she had completely entered this strange small space. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips and walked toward the 2 tombstones. Although she could not fly, she had already tempered her divine body, so her speed was not slow. About 2 hours later, she finally arrived in front of the 2 tombstones. The tombstones were carved from white jade and were about the height of a person. Probably because they had been through too much wind, frost, and rain, there were already traces of time on them. The words on the tombstones were already a little blurry. But if one looked carefully, they could still be distinguished. The strange thing was that only one of the 2 tombstones had words on it. Chu Luiyue looked to her right. There was a line of words carved on the tombstone. Tang Ke's tomb. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Although the outside world had always said that Tang Ke was dead, and even before they came in, they had always thought that this was Tang Ke's tomb. But in fact, Tang Ke clearly still had a soul left. He was not dead at all. Then who set up this tombstone? Other than Tang Ke, there should be no one else here. Could it be that he carved it himself? Chu Luiyue felt a burst of absurdity and disbelief at the thought that came to his mind. However, other than this answer, no other explanation seemed to make sense. She looked at the tombstone on the left. The surface was smooth and flat, and there were no words carved on it. The nameless tomb. Chu Luiyue rested his chin on his hand and fell into deep thought. To be able to stand side by side with Tang Ke's tomb, the person buried under this tombstone was naturally not an ordinary person. But why was there no name on it? Was it because the person who set up the monument didn't know who this person was? Or, this person's name couldn't appear on it? Chu Luiyue carefully recalled Tang Ke's life. Back then, he had left the Tang clan alone. After he disappeared without a trace, the people of the Tang family were quickly exterminated. It was unlikely that the person below was anyone else from the Tang family. Who could it be? Tang Ku could summon the wind and summon the rain. It was hard to imagine what kind of person he would allow to be buried with him. Chu Luiwei didn't think that Tang Ku didn't know the situation here. Did he let me in on purpose? Chu Luiwei had a lot of questions in her mind. She stared at the nameless tombstone and fell into deep thought. Suddenly, a name appeared in her mind. Wait a minute. Back then, there was indeed a person who disappeared almost at the same time as Tang Ku. It was that person, Mr. Su. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, Chu Luiwei's eyes flashed. Those sacred artifacts actually flew out and landed in front of the nameless tombstone. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2077. A ray of light flew out of the heavenly square cauldron and landed on the tombstone. It was as if the intense darkness was suddenly torn apart by the light. Something gradually appeared on the tombstone. Chu Luiwei's eyebrows moved slightly. Then, the flowing cloud flying diagram and the great azure sun axe appeared. The three rays of light converged. A mysterious rune was revealed bit by bit. Chu Luiwei looked at it. These runes were somewhat familiar. She seemed to have seen them on the armillary shield. In order to confirm her thoughts, she summoned the armillary shield and carefully examined it. Indeed, these runes were exactly the same as the one on the armillary shield. However, the runes engraved on the tombstone were only half of those on the armillary shield. Moreover, these runes seemed to be sealed by something. After the light of the three divine artifacts surged, only a part of them was lit up. The rest of the runes were dark and could not be seen clearly. Could it be that 5 divine artifacts were required to be here at the same time to reveal their original appearance? Chu Luiwei crossed her arms and fell into deep thought. However, the reaction of the 3 divine artifacts was enough to prove that this was very likely Mr. Su's tomb. The 2 of them were buried in the same place. Chu Luiwei took a deep breath. Her heart was still surging with waves. The world only knew that the 2 of them had a shocking battle back then. After the battle ended in a draw, they disappeared without a trace. Who would have thought that their tombstones were erected together? Tang Ku asked her to come in. Could it be related to Mr. Su? After all, she had 3 divine artifacts made by Mr. Su. Suddenly, a fluctuation appeared on the armillary shield. Then, a faint glow overflowed from it and covered half of it. Chu Luiwei was very familiar with this feeling. In the beginning, when she was outside and before she came in, the armillary shield had shown a similar reaction. So, it was not Tang Ku's summon, but Mr. Su's tomb? After that, Chu Luiwei subconsciously raised her hand and reached forward. Her palm gently covered the runes. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of a heartbeat came from the tombstone. Chu Luiwei was shocked. This heartbeat was not hers. Just as she was about to retreat, she suddenly saw that under her palm, there was a sudden burst of light. Almost at the same time, the force in her body began to surge toward the tombstone at an astonishing speed. Not good. Chu Luiwei sensed that something was amiss and immediately increased his strength. However, he was shocked to find that he could no longer withdraw his hand from the tombstone. There seemed to be something inside that was madly devouring her origin power. As for her body, it was as if it was being suppressed by an invisible force. She was unable to move. Bang bang. The sound of his heartbeat became clearer and clearer. Chu Luiwei could feel the force in his body rapidly depleting. She frowned. Fortunately, she had stored an extremely shocking amount of origin power within her dantian. Otherwise, just this short consumption would have been enough to overdraft her. Ah, you! Sensing that something was wrong, Dumpling also jumped out. Seeing Chu Luiwei's frown, Dumpling was also very anxious. She and Chu Luiwei were bound by a life contract, so she knew very well that Chu Luiwei's energy was being devoured at a frightening speed. Ah, you, let me help you. Dumpling was about to step forward, but Chu Luiwei immediately stopped her in her tracks. Stop right there. Don't come over. The aura within the tombstone was extremely powerful. More importantly, it was clearly coming for her. Even Dumpling would not be of much help. If she was not careful, she might even implicate Dumpling. Dumpling heard this and instinctively stood rooted to the ground. However, seeing Chu Liyue's rapidly pale face, her heart also clenched. Her grape-like eyes were instantly covered by a layer of mist. "Ah, you," Chu Liyue took a deep breath. "Zichen." As soon as she finished speaking, a black figure flashed in front of her. Zichen also responded to the summons. Chu Liyue said, "Help me look after Dumpling." Zichen nodded. After speaking, he was about to move when he saw fine beads of sweat continuously appearing on Chu Liyue's forehead. A rare hint of hesitation appeared on his cold and indifferent face. "Master, do you really not need help?" Looking at her like this really made him feel uneasy. Chu Liyue forced a smile. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." The reason why she asked Zichen and Dumpling to temporarily retreat was that even she felt that the situation was too dangerous. If something happened, the three of them would be directly wiped out. Therefore, after careful consideration, this was the most appropriate choice. Zichen instantly understood her thoughts. He pursed his thin lips and nodded. "Zichen will not disappoint you. Master, please be careful." After speaking, he moved and came to Dumpling's side. At this moment, Dumpling was about to step forward barefooted. Before she could take 2 steps, Zichen blocked her way. "Master, you mean to wait and see?" Zichen lowered his head and looked at the little one in front of him. His voice was as cold as usual. Dumpling's line of sight was blocked by 2 long legs. When she heard this, she raised her head and put her hands on her waist indignantly. "But now Ah Yu is in danger. I want to go." She snorted indignantly and changed direction. She walked around Zichen with her short legs, intending to rush over. As she walked, she muttered, "I'm the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. And I've already opened my 5th meridian. I can definitely help you. Even if I can't, I can call Grandpa Clan leader and the others." Ugh. Before she finished speaking, her body suddenly flew into the air. It was actually Zichen who had directly scooped her up. Whatever she says is the truth. Dumpling's small body was easily locked in his arms. She began to struggle with all her might. "Let go of me. I want to go over." However, her small body was not worth mentioning in front of Zichen. Although her strength had increased greatly, Zichen was not to be trifled with. After all, behind Zichen stood the great Phoenix Dragon Clan's clan leader, Mao Jin. The current Dumpling was still very young compared to her. Seeing that Dumpling was unwilling to give up, Zichen narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "If you're not afraid of delaying her, go ahead." As soon as he said that, Tuanzi finally calmed down. She was just worried about Ayu. After thinking for a long time, she looked up at Zichen. "Are you saying that Ayu will really be fine?" Zichen raised his chin. "You just have to watch for yourself." He was also her contracted magical beast, and his worries were no less than Dumpling's. But he knew that Chu Liyue did not need their help at this time. That tombstone, from the beginning, it was targeted at her. Time passed slowly. Chu Liyue's face was pale. Her vision turned black. This was a sign of exhaustion. She closed her eyes. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2078. At this moment, the amount of energy that was being drained from her had exceeded the limit of an ordinary high god. If not for the abundant force stored in her body, she would have died from exhaustion. However, the scary thing was that this was not the end. It was as if there was a bottomless pit in the tombstone that was constantly draining her energy. Chu Liyue closed her eyes and adjusted her breathing as she pondered. What was hidden in there? Thump, 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 thump. Chu Liyue took a deep breath and opened her eyes again. Under her palm, the originally dim areas of the runes engraved on the tombstone were gradually lighting up. Obviously, it was benefiting from the fact that it was draining her energy. Chu Liyue suddenly curled her lips and smiled helplessly. If I had known this would happen, I would have snatched the remaining divine weapons first, If all 5 of Mr. Su's divine weapons were in her hands, she would not have committed such a grave crime. But at this moment, things had already come to this point, and all of this could only be said. Chu Luiwei closed her eyes. Outsiders would probably think that she was accepting Tang Ku's inheritance. Who would have thought that she was going through something like this? She finally understood that Senior Tang Ku was actually trying to lure her here. There was probably no hope for the inheritance anymore. Now, she only hoped that she could get out of here in one piece. I wonder what kind of relationship Mr. Su has with him that he would go through so much trouble. Chu Luiwei mumbled to herself. Suddenly, a faint cracking sound could be heard. Chu Luiwei was stunned and immediately turned her head to look. The last dim area of the runes was finally completely covered by the lustrous light. Buzz. In an instant, the light shone brightly. Chu Luiwei felt a vast and majestic aura suddenly surging out from the tombstone. It was coming straight for her. She was shocked and immediately retreated. But this time, the inexplicable pressure around her finally dissipated, and she quickly retreated a distance away. Chu Luiwei did not expect that she could successfully retreat. She looked at her palm in shock. Did they split up? That tombstone. She instinctively looked up and saw that the light on the tombstone was rapidly gathering. Then, it gradually condensed into a translucent figure. It was a woman who looked to be in her 20s. She wore a light green dress and had a slender figure. Her black hair casually fell to her ankles and she wore a silver-white headband inlaid with rubies. Her facial features were delicate and beautiful. When she looked over, her eyes were like spring water, warm and gentle. With a single glance, one could tell that she was an extremely gentle woman. She stepped forward, crossed her hands in front of her stomach, and curtsied toward Chu Luiwei. Su Li, thanks miss for saving my life. Her voice was melodious and it was sweet. Chu Luiwei widened her eyes slightly. This, Mr. Su? She asked in disbelief. When Su Li smiled, 2 small dimples appeared on the corners of her lips. Su Li will never forget Mrs. Kindness. It's really her. Chu Luiwei looked as if she was struck by lightning. She stared blankly at the woman in front of her, but her heart was in turmoil. Su Li, Mr. Su, who was rumored to be all-powerful and equally matched with Tang Ku, was actually a woman. Chu Luiwei spent a lot of effort to calm the waves in her heart. She opened her mouth but did not know what to say. There were so many versions of the rumors, but none of them said that Mr. Su was a woman. All of this happened too suddenly, and even Chu Luiwei was dazed. She had always thought that Mr. Su was an old man or a middle-aged man with a strong physique. Anyway, he was very different from the beautiful and gentle woman in front of her. May I know your name, miss? Seeing that Chu Luiwei did not speak, Su Li thought that her sudden appearance had startled her, so she asked gently. She could not know the woman's name since she had saved her life. Chu Luiwei gradually regained her rationality. Shangguan Yu. So it's Miss Shangguan. Su Li smiled and looked at the armillary shield beside Chu Luiwei. Her eyes flashed with a hint of emotion. Miss Shangguan, are you from Peach Blossom Dock? Chu Luiwei followed her gaze and looked over. It was normal for Su Li to guess that since the armillary shield was here. She sorted out her thoughts and said, yes. It seems that Peach Blossom Dock belongs to Miss Shangguan now. Chu Luiwei was stunned for a moment. How did Mr. Su know? Su Li covered her mouth and smiled. Since the armillary shield has recognized Miss Shangguan as its owner, Peach Blossom Dock naturally belongs to Miss Shangguan. Chu Luiwei had already guessed that Peach Blossom Dock was related to the armillary shield. After hearing Su Li's words, she was even more certain. The battle between Su Li and Tang Ke took place at Peach Blossom Dock. Half of the runes of the armillary shield were engraved on her tombstone. It was normal for her to know about this. Chu Luiwei nodded slightly. Mr. Su is indeed wise. Su Li smiled again. Miss Shangguan, you are treating me as an outsider. Chu Luiwei shook her head and smiled. You are a senior, and everyone calls you Mr. Su. I'm used to calling you that. Although the Su Li in front of her was gentle, generous, elegant, and calm, she wouldn't forget that half of the current 10 great sacred artifacts were created by her. Such a person was definitely worthy of being addressed as Mr. Su Li's eyes flickered, as if she had fallen into a distant memory. After a long time, she smiled and sighed. Back then, I disguised myself as a man and walked around the world of divine ruins, so that was why everyone misunderstood her true identity. Chu Luiyue nodded. Actually, she had already guessed this. Su Li's battle with Tang Ku was already shocking enough. If everyone knew that she was a woman, it would probably cause even more shock. Su Li said with a guilty look on her face. Speaking of which, just now, I didn't want to forcefully devour Miss Shangguan's force. I hope Miss Shangguan can forgive me. Speaking of this, Chu Luiyue also had a lot of questions. Mr. Su, you mean, was she not the one who did all this? As if she had seen Chu Luiyue's doubts, Su Li sighed softly and turned to look at the tombstone. Miss Shangguan, do you know who erected this tombstone? Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment. Senior Tang Ku? Su Li nodded, and a touch of worry appeared between her eyebrows. In fact, these two tombstones were erected by him. After that battle, I died and my soul scattered, but he survived. It was because of his help that my soul was preserved and I slept until now. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2079. However, this method can only preserve my soul, but it can't really revive me. Furthermore, as time passes, my soul will grow weaker and weaker. In the end, it will completely dissipate. She turned around and looked at Chu Luiyue with a complicated expression. In a few months, it will be the end of my lifespan. If it wasn't for Miss Shangguan's help today, I'm afraid. Once she said this, Chu Luiyue had even more questions in her heart. Mr. Su, why me? She had come back to her senses. Tang Ke only had one purpose from the beginning, which was to lure her here and revive Su Li. However, she had nothing to do with Su Li and Tang Ke. There were so many people in the world, why did they choose her? If she had to say, is it because of the 3 divine artifacts? This was the only and biggest connection between her and Su Li. Hearing this, Su Li shook her head. Those are just superficial factors. In fact, the real reason is the armillary shield. Chu Luiyue was stunned. That's right. Half of the runes on the armillary shield were engraved on the tombstone. She suddenly thought of something and looked at Tang Ke's tomb next to her. Could it be? That's right. The other half of the runes are engraved on this tombstone. Su Li said softly. For a moment, Chu Luiyue's mind was in a mess. Countless thoughts flashed through her mind. Back then, Su Li and Tang Ke fought to a draw and then disappeared. In fact, it was because Su Li died and Tang Ke brought her here to be buried. He also set up a tombstone next to her. This was a sacrificial burial? Then she thought of what Su Li said just now. Tang Ke had been trying to revive her for so many years, an answer was on the verge of appearing. Tang Ke clearly loved Su Li deeply. If not, he would never set up a tombstone for her and Su Li. He was not dead yet, but he had already planned to be buried together with her after he died. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. Everyone knew that Tang Ke was a genius who was aloof. He never married and had children in his life. Everyone thought that for someone like him, the only thought in his heart was to refine artifacts. How could he care about the love of the mortal world? Who would have thought that he would go to such an extent for Su Li? Senior Tang Ke, he treated you, Chu Luiyue said hesitantly. The two of you have already, no. Su Li blushed slightly. The battle at Peach Blossom Cove was indeed the first time the two of us met. I come from a humble background, and I don't have much talent in martial arts. Therefore, I have been abandoned by my family since I was young. Later on, by chance, I discovered that I had a pretty good talent in refining artifacts. Later on, I left my family and followed my master to cultivate. Master is a weapon refining venerable, but he has always been living in seclusion and I have always followed him. It was only after I broke through to become a weapon refining venerable and my master passed away that I started to roam the divine ruins world. Chu Luiyue understood. I see. This also explained why the world had never heard of her name. She had indeed been cultivating in peace all this time. At that time, I was young and ignorant. I heard that Tang Ku was very famous and was the #1 artificer in the world. Therefore, I sent a letter of challenge. Su Li was still emotional when she mentioned the past. Who would have thought that so many things would happen at Peach Blossom Cove? Wonderful book house. Chapter 2080. She paused and did not continue. Instead, she raised her hand and pointed at her tombstone. When Tang Ku erected these 2 tombstones, he deliberately left a mechanism on them. If someone comes here, the mechanism will automatically activate and forcibly deprive him of his strength. In other words, no matter who comes here, it will be the same. Chu Liwei frowned slightly. If that was the case, it was too domineering. It would be fine if she was the one who came here today. But if it were someone else, he or she would not be so lucky to escape. Su Li nodded and comforted her. But don't worry. Although I didn't know about the mechanism before, you should be the only one who has come here all these years. Chu Liwei heaved a sigh of relief at first, but then her expression became a little strange. Why did it sound like Tang Ku had been waiting for her here since early in the morning? Su Li sighed and continued to speak. He must have known that the armillary shield has recognized you as its owner, so he let you in. In fact, Chu Liwei thought so too. So, only the owner of the armillary shield can help you? You can say that. Su Li smiled bitterly. After all, it was the armillary shield that caused my death and his serious injuries. Chu Liwei was shocked. Didn't you two compete in weapon refining at the Peach Blossom Dock? What does this have to do with the armillary shield? Su Li paused, looked up, and stared at Chu Liwei. Miss Shangguan, you don't know. Tang Ku and I were only weapon refining venerables at that time. The reason why we could break through the shackles and refine 5 divine weapons is actually related to the armillary shield. At that time, the armillary shield suddenly appeared in the world. We both knew that it was extraordinary and fought fiercely for it. During the process, the power of the armillary shield dissipated, causing chaos in the Peach Blossom Dock. The divine weapons that we refined at that time were further refined and became divine weapons by chance. Chu Liuyue's pupils suddenly shrank. Su Li's words were indeed a shocking secret. You mean, the reason why you and Senior Tang Ku were able to refine the 10 great sacred weapons was actually because of the power of the armillary shield. A small dimple appeared on Su Li's lips and she sighed softly. I don't know how much energy and mental energy is needed to refine a saint artifact. What's more, we were only venerables at that time. Even if we had heaven-defying abilities, how could we each refine 5 items at the same time? Chaotic Stone Forest. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. However, there was still no movement from the entrance. Everything looked exactly the same as it did in the beginning. There were no changes at all. Some people gradually became impatient. It's been so long. Why haven't they come out yet? TSK. That was the inheritance of the venerable artificer. How could he possibly use half a month's time? If you can't wait any longer, you can leave now. Why complain? I just thought it was a little strange, that's all. There's no other meaning. It's fine if Shanghai Yu hasn't come out, but why hasn't there been any movement from Rong Xiu either? He doesn't need such a long time to inherit Tang Ku's inheritance, right? That's hard to say. Don't forget that the Thousand Peaks halberd has already recognized him as its master. That's a saint artifact that Tang Ku personally refined. Even if it's just for the sake of this thing, Tang Ku will still favor him a little, right? Maybe he's waiting for Shanghai Yu inside. All kinds of discussions were heard one after another. After a long time, it was inevitable that people would have all kinds of guesses in their hearts. Shengguan Jing listened at the side. He stroked his beard and looked at the closed door thoughtfully. In fact, he wasn't worried about their safety. He was just curious about their progress inside. If Yu could really inherit Tang Ku's inheritance, he would have another trump card in the future. At this moment, a sharp whistle came from the sky. Everyone looked up, but they didn't see anything. However, Wei Zhe, who had been staying in a remote corner, suddenly stood up. He raised his head to take a look and furrowed his brows. The family Wei's people were here. Wei Zhe hesitated for a moment and walked outside. Family Wei's people, follow me. His followers hurriedly followed after hearing this. Many people looked over when they heard the commotion. It seemed that Wei Zhe was planning to leave. Family Wei's leader, you're leaving just like that? Someone raised his voice and asked. They haven't come out yet. Wei Zhe stopped in his tracks. That whistle is used by my family Wei to transmit messages. I have to go out and take a look. Only then did everyone understand. It seemed that the matter was not small. Otherwise, Wei Zhe wouldn't have chosen to leave so decisively. In the previous competition, he came in second place and almost won Tang Ku's inheritance. Was he convinced? No one could tell. Everyone thought that he would insist on staying here until the two of them came out. However, since the family Wei had something to deal with, others naturally couldn't say much. Wei Zhe continued to leave with his followers. Perhaps because Tang Ku had already chosen the inheritor, Wei Zhe and the others didn't encounter any accidents when they left this time. They were unimpeded all the way. Soon, their figures disappeared behind many stones. Most people quickly looked away. Only Shangguan Jing stared in the direction Wei Zhe left for a long time. The person next to him asked curiously, Shangguan, what are you looking at? Shangguan Jing said, nothing. I just feel that Wei Zhe left a little suddenly. Didn't he say that it was because the family Wei's people came to invite him? After all, the stone forest is the family Wei's territory, and he has been here for a long time. Maybe there really is something that he needs to go back to deal with in person? Shangguan Jing didn't say anything. He still felt that something was wrong. Wei Zhe came to the stone forest this time for Tang Ku's tomb. It was impossible for the Wei clan to be unaware of this. Since that was the case, Wei Zhe should have made sufficient arrangements and preparations. What urgent matter could be more important than Tang Ku's tomb? The family Wei's people came just like that. Did they not think that Wei Zhe might be inheriting Tang Ku's inheritance at this time? Unless, they knew that Wei Zhe didn't have anything important to do at this moment. Although Wei Zhe had been staying here ever since he came out, no one could guarantee that he hadn't contacted the outside world. And when he left just now, there was even a hint of urgency and haste in his movements. Shangguan Jing pondered for a long time but couldn't come up with an answer. In the end, he suppressed this suspicion. On the other side, Wei Zhe walked out of the stone forest smoothly. When he took the last step, he looked back. It was quiet in the stone forest. No one could imagine what had happened inside during this period of time. An old man was already waiting outside. When he saw him come out, he immediately stepped forward. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2081. Patriarch, is everything all right? Wei Qihan asked with concern as he quickly sized up Wei Zhe. When he saw that Wei Zhe's aura was a little weak, he immediately became nervous. It seemed that things didn't go as smoothly as expected. Wei Zhe frowned. Tang Ku's inheritance was snatched by Shangguanyu. Wei Qihan's heart sank. Shangguanyu? The one from Peach Blossom Dock? This name had been too famous recently, and it was hard not to know. How is that possible? Don't you have Senior Tang Ku's 10,000 Peaks halberd? Also, you have... Wei Zhe's expression suddenly turned cold as he gave him a warning look. Wei Qihan immediately shut up. Wei Zhe's expression softened a little before he said, 10,000 Peaks halberd has acknowledged Rong Xiu as its master. As for the rest, I can't explain it in a few words. Anyway, the outcome has been decided, and it's useless to say anything. Wei Qihan was shocked and confused, but seeing that Wei Zhe didn't seem to want to talk about it, he wisely didn't continue asking. Well, as long as you're safe. Wei Zhe walked forward. How's the situation in the clan? Patriarch, don't worry. After I received your message, I came here alone without anyone noticing. Wei Zhe nodded in satisfaction. That's good. Hearing the conversation between the two, the people behind Wei Zhe were all shocked and looked at each other in dismay. Did the Patriarch inform Elder Wei Qihan first before coming out? Wei Qihan glanced at them. Patriarch, these people, hearing this, a strong sense of uneasiness surged in their hearts. Patriarch, Wei Zhe didn't stop walking. He didn't even turn his head. His voice was cold and indifferent. Clean them up and say that they died in the stone forest. Wei Qihan immediately accepted the order and waved his sleeve. Before those people could beg for mercy, their throats were all slit. Blood splattered everywhere. Soon, all of them fell to the ground, no longer breathing. Wei Qihan took out a small jade bottle and poured out some transparent and odorless liquid. The corpses quickly turned into puddles of water and evaporated, leaving no trace behind. His series of actions flowed smoothly like water. Clearly, this was not the first time he had done it. After he was done, he quickly stepped forward and caught up with Wei Zhe. The two figures quickly disappeared. Half an hour later, the two of them arrived at a mountain peak 100 miles away from the stone forest. Wei Zhe was familiar with the route and headed straight for the cave halfway up the mountain. Wei Qihan, on the other hand, concealed himself and was responsible for guarding outside the cave. Wei Zhe headed deeper into the cave. The deeper they went, the darker it became. However, Wei Zhe seemed to have been here many times. He did not slow down at all as he rushed straight into the cave. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The sound of water dripping could be faintly heard. When Wei Zhe heard this voice, he was delighted and immediately sped up. After turning a corner, a faint glow appeared. A small pool appeared in front of him. That ray of light came from a stalactite above the pool. Water continued to drip down from the top, finally dripping into the pool. Wei Zhe heaved a sigh of relief. He quickly stepped forward, took out the purplish-black hammer, and placed it in the center of the pool. Tick-tock. A drop of water happened to fall on the hammer. The patterns on it gradually became clearer. Wei Zhe immediately felt the depleted energy in his body being replenished. Thank goodness he made it back in time. Shiping, are you all right? Wei Zhe asked anxiously. A moment later, a young man's voice came from the purplish-black hammer. Father, don't worry. I'm fine. If Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue were here, they would definitely recognize Wei Shiping's voice. When Wei Zhe heard this, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. However, when he thought of everything that had happened, he still could not completely relax. It's all my fault for being useless. I almost let you. It's not your fault. Wei Shiping's voice sounded a little weak, with a hint of gloominess and viciousness. It's all because those two are too cunning and treacherous. Otherwise, he and his father would have been the ones to inherit Tang Ku's legacy. Now, all of their carefully planned plans had been completely destroyed. When he mentioned this, Wei Zhe was filled with resentment. Those two are too cunning. Shiping, you should stay here and recuperate for now. I have a feeling that Rong Xiao seems to have discovered something. You can use this time to recuperate. Father, don't worry. I know what you're saying. Although I didn't succeed this time, at least I've absorbed a lot of Tianlei's energy. It won't be long before my strength reaches a new level. Only then did Wei Zhe truly feel at ease. During this time, I'll stay here and watch over you. When Shangguan Yu and the others come out of the stone forest, we can plan our revenge. The departure of Wei Zhe and the others did not affect the others. After they left, the stone forest quickly returned to its previous state. Everyone began to wait again. This kind of time was always long and torturous. However, they were really curious about Chu Luiyue's situation, so they had no choice but to continue. After Su Li finished speaking, Chu Luiyue was silent for a long time. She did not expect such a shocking secret to be hidden behind the 10 great sage artifacts. If these sage artifacts were all refined with the power of the celestial shield, then what about the celestial shield? What kind of existence was it? Su Li's hand slowly swept across the tombstone. The runes engraved on it were uneven and rough. Although we've all refined 5 sage artifacts, we've also paid a great price for it. My physical body has fallen, and my soul is on the verge of death. Although Tang Ku's condition is better than mine, erecting these 2 tombstones exhausted almost all of his energy. Chu Luiyue pondered for a long time and finally asked, why did Senior Tang Ku divide the runes on the celestial shield into 2 and engrave them on these 2 tombstones? Su Li looked back. This is the only way to wait until the day the celestial shield recognizes its master. She pointed at the 3 sage artifacts. Back then, the power in the celestial shield was divided into 2 by the 2 of us and then injected into the sage artifacts. If you want to completely awaken the celestial shield, you have to take back the power. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2082. Awaken the Celestial Shield? Chu Luiwei was a little surprised. In her opinion, the Celestial Shield had already awakened when it caused the mountain fire in the Peach Blossom Dock. Moreover, it had already recognized her as its master. Why did it still need to be awakened now? As if sensing her doubts, Su Li shook her head with a smile and explained. You are indeed the master of the Celestial Shield, but it's not in its original state. I can't describe with words how powerful the Celestial Shield is when it's fully unleashed. However, if you want to become stronger, this is the step you have to take. She looked extremely serious. Chu Luiwei paused and asked, if that's the case, what will happen to these divine artifacts in the end? Once the power is extracted, then wouldn't it become a pile of scrap metal again? You don't have to worry about this. Although the Celestial Shield's power is stored in these divine artifacts, awakening the Celestial Shield doesn't need to extract the power. All you need to do is to gather them. When 10 divine artifacts are gathered, the Celestial Shield will naturally awaken completely. Chu Luiwei then felt more at ease. She didn't know about the other divine artifacts, but the ones she had now were extremely precious and powerful. She really couldn't bear to destroy it. So, what I need to do is to gather 10 divine artifacts? Su Li nodded. Chu Luiwei rubbed her temples as she felt a headache coming on. Then you think too highly of me. It was easy to say, but it was very troublesome to do. After spending so much time and effort, she had only managed to obtain 3 of them. Excluding the Thousand Peaks halberd of the Rong Xiu, there were still 6 divine artifacts. Where could she find them? If she guessed correctly, the remaining divine artifacts were now scattered among the major families and clans in the Divine Ruins world. Those were the treasures of their clans. How could she snatch them? Even if she was now the Peach Blossom Dock's lord, it was still as difficult as ascending to heaven. Su Li's lips curved into a smile. Lady Shangguan, this might be extremely difficult for others, but for you, it is indeed something you can do. Don't forget that the Celestial Shield is now in your hands. Chu Luiyue's mind flickered. Mr. Su, you mean, the 10 great sacred artifacts only broke through their shackles and became sacred artifacts with the help of the Celestial Globe Shield's power. If the Armillary Heaven Shield summons them, they will naturally come. Chu Luiyue's eyelids twitched violently. Mr. Su, are you asking me to rob you? Su Li blinked her eyes and smiled. Her dimples were shallow, and she said gently, I'm sorry. How can you say that it's a robbery? In this world, the strong were respected. Whoever had the ability would win. Besides, even the Armillary Heaven Shield now belongs to you, Miss Shangguan, so why worry about those saint artifacts? That was yours in the first place. Outside the bronze door, Rong Xiu stood with his hands behind his back. Tang Ke knelt not far behind him. Silence reigned in the vast space. Only the countless Tianlei in the sky were still rotating leisurely. The radiance was resplendent and dazzling. At a certain moment, Rong Xiu's brows twitched and he turned around. Tang Ke immediately tensed up. Your Highness, Rong Xiu looked at him indifferently. Get up. Tang Ke was stunned at first, but then he suddenly realized something, and his eyes were overflowing with excitement. Your Highness, you mean, it was done. It seemed that it was done inside. Because Rong Xiu was here, he did not dare to secretly investigate the situation inside. At this moment, his heart was finally at ease. I dare not forget Master Yu's kindness. When Master Yu comes out safely, I will give you all my wealth. What he was talking about was the endless sea of thunder that had accumulated for tens of thousands of years. Rong Xiu raised his brows slightly and said calmly, She won't be interested in your little things. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2083. But, Su Li said hesitantly, summoning the 10 great sacred artifacts and awakening the armillary shield is still a little difficult for Miss Shangguan now. To be safe, Miss Shangguan should wait until you become a weapon-refining venerable before making a decision. Chu Luiyue nodded. She understood what Su Li meant. Summoning the 10 great sacred artifacts was definitely not an easy task. Even if she was the owner of the armillary shield now, it was still difficult to do it. It was already difficult for her to deal with 3 sacred artifacts at the same time, let alone 10. In addition, once the armillary shield is awakened, its power is amazing. Although Miss Shangguan is powerful and has tempered her divine body with the god-destroying tribulation, if you can use it in the god realm, your success rate will increase a lot. Su Li said seriously, and Chu Luiyue also listened carefully. Thank you for your advice, Mr. Su. I will remember it in my heart. Chu Luiyue's hand slowly brushed across the armillary shield. Although she also wanted to see the true power of the armillary shield, now was obviously not the right time. Before that, she had to improve her strength first. Feeling the uneven secret text under her finger, Chu Luiyue asked curiously. I have one more thing to ask. Mr. Su, do you recognize the secret text on this? Su Li shook her head. Chu Luiyue's heart sank slightly. In fact, she had already guessed this when she heard Su Li talk about the things that happened in the past. It was just that she was unwilling to give up and had to ask clearly. Originally, she thought that she could get some clues from Tang Ke. However, to be able to see Su Li and learn about the secrets of the armillary shield, this trip was not in vain. The so-called inheritance of Tang Ke did not exist. The secret to becoming a weapon-refining saint was the armillary shield and the 10 great sacred artifacts. For Su Li, Tang Ke really put in a lot of effort and did not hesitate to wait for 10,000 years. Although she was tricked into entering, after knowing the cause and effect, she could not be angry no matter what. She could only sigh endlessly. Chu Luiyue's mind calmed down. Since you have woken up now, how about you go out with me? Su Li heard this and was slightly stunned. Go out? Yeah. Chu Luiyue looked around. Although this place was full of energy, it was too lonely. As far as the eye could see, one would only feel a deep sense of loneliness. He really did not know how Tang Ke had endured for such a long time. She smiled at Su Li. If Senior Tang Ke sees you again, he will definitely be very happy. At the mention of Tang Ke, Su Li's expression wavered. In fact, that battle back then was the first time the two of them had met, and it was also the only time. After that, her physical body was destroyed and her soul scattered. If it wasn't for Tang Ke, she would have died long ago. Even she didn't know why Tang Ke would do this for her. Su Li bit her lips and hesitated. She still hadn't figured out how to face Tang Ke. Chu Luiyue looked at her. He didn't need to ask to know what Su Li was thinking. Although she was once the all-powerful Mr. Su, she was also a woman who knew nothing about love. She had spent most of her time and energy on cultivation. Originally, she had only issued a challenge to Tang Ke out of curiosity and competitiveness. Who knew that after the battle at Peach Blossom Dock, Su Li suddenly asked, Miss Shangguan, why do you think he did this? We've only met once and fought once. She knew how much Tang Ke had done for her, but it was also because of this that she was even more perturbed and confused. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. Chu Luiyue looked down and seemed to be thinking. After a while, she looked up at the 2 tombstones side by side and smiled. There seemed to be stars shining in her eyes. Love is the most unreasonable thing in the world. Outside the bronze gate, after confirming that Su Li had woken up, Tang Ke became anxious and looked in the direction of the gate from time to time. Rong Xiu glanced at him. You have waited for 10,000 years. What's the difference in a little while? No matter what, he had to wait for you or to rest. Tang Ke's face was a little embarrassed, but there was still unconcealable joy in his eyes. I'm just too happy, although he had been thinking about this day for a long time. But when all this really happened, he felt that it was too unreal in his heart and he couldn't believe it. Rong Xiu paused and said, Have you ever thought that after doing so much, you might not be able to keep her in the end? Tang Ke was stunned. After a moment of silence, he said, "As long as she can be safe, I have no other request." Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips slightly raised, revealing a very faint smile. Tang Ku was a little puzzled. "Your Highness, why are you smiling?" Rong Xiu was about to speak, but suddenly he turned back and looked at the bronze gate. Almost at the same time, Tang Ku suddenly realized something, and she looked up and fixed her eyes on it. Creak! The bronze gate that was closed tightly slowly opened. Two figures, one in front and one behind, walked out. The one in front was Chu Luiyue, and the translucent figure behind was undoubtedly Su Li. Chu Luiyue walked out and saw Rong Xiu standing not far from the gate. Her lips curved up, and she was about to say something when she suddenly saw a figure standing behind Rong Xiu. It was a man who looked to be in his 30s, handsome and tall. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment before she realized that this person was Tang Ku. Hearing his voice, Chu Luiyue thought that he should be quite old, but who knew that he was so young? Did he know that Su Li had woken up, so he came out? "Senior Tang Ku." Chu Luiyue shook her head helplessly and smiled. "You're finally willing to come out?" Tang Ku's gaze fell on Su Li, and for a moment he was in a daze. Her appearance was exactly the same as when he first saw her, and there was no change at all. At this moment, he even felt that everything had happened yesterday. The long years in between were just a dream. Su Li's heart skipped a beat, but she was the first to react. "Tang Ku, long time no see." Tang Ku suddenly came back to his senses, suppressed the waves in his heart, and slowly smiled. "Long time no see." Chu Luiyue's eyes swept back and forth between the two of them, and said with a smile, "The two of you have been separated for a long time, and now that you finally meet, you should have a lot to say. We won't disturb you for now." As she spoke, she walked to Rong Xiu's side, gently nudged him with her elbow, and asked in a low voice, "When did Senior Tang come out?" Rong Xiu held her hand and pulled her in front of him. He looked around carefully for a while, and only when he was sure that she was all right did he relax. Hearing Chu Luiyue's question, he thought for a moment. "About an hour ago." Chu Luiyue calculated in her heart that was about the time Su Li woke up. It seemed that Tang Ku should know the situation inside. She blinked and asked again, "Then, did Senior Tang make things difficult for you?" Rong Xiu's sword-like eyebrows raised slightly, and he smiled casually. "That's not it." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2084. Creak. The door, which had been quiet for a long time, finally made a sound. Shangguan Jing and the others, who were waiting outside, immediately perked up and looked over. The door slowly opened, and a tall figure walked out. It was Rong Xiu. Behind him, Chu Luiyue's figure also entered the crowd's eyes. Shangguan Jing was delighted. He quickly stepped forward and looked at the two of them seriously. "How are you?" Chu Luiyue smiled and said, "Taizu, don't worry. Everything is going well." The atmosphere in the surroundings suddenly became subtle. Many people secretly exchanged glances. Does this mean that she has successfully obtained Tang Ku's inheritance? After all, she had won that competition. Tang Ku had also shown that he admired her very much. It was reasonable for him to teach her everything. This also meant that in the future, she was very likely to break through to become a refining saint. With Shangguan Jing, this family was probably invincible. Shangguan Jing was also excited. "That's good. That's good. He knew that you would definitely be able to do it." After a moment, someone in the crowd finally asked boldly, "May I ask Holy Son and Master Yu, how is Senior Tang Ku now?" They had come out. "Then, what about Tang Ku?" He still had a strand of his soul left behind. Chu Luiyue looked at the person who asked and smiled calmly. Senior Tang Ku said that he was already used to staying here. Now that everything is over, he will completely seal this place and never come out again. When everyone heard this, they were first surprised, then regretful. In that case, wouldn't they have no chance to come and ask for advice in the future? Rong Xiu glanced at everyone and narrowed his eyes. "Family Wei is not here?" Hearing what he said, Chu Luiyue realized that Wei Zhe was indeed not here. That was strange. With Wei Zai's temperament and style, he didn't seem to leave before they came out, right? Shang Guanjing explained. 3 days ago, Family Wei's people came and said that there was an urgent matter that he needed to deal with personally. So he left with his people. Rong Xiu smiled. I see. It seems like the head of the Family Wei is really busy. Chu Liyue's thoughts turned, and the corners of his lips curved slightly. I originally planned to bid farewell to the head of the Family Wei, but now it seems that I shouldn't disturb you. Since that's the case, we'll leave first. If fate wills it in the future, we'll naturally meet again. He was about to leave. Many people felt empty inside when they heard this. Everyone had come here with high hopes. Now that they didn't get anything, they naturally felt that it was a pity. But if he wanted to leave, they couldn't stop him. Moreover, after this incident, Chu Liyue, who had obtained Tang Ke's inheritance, would definitely have a bright future. Building a good relationship was much better than making enemies. Immediately, many people bid farewell to them in an amiable manner, speaking and behaving very politely. Chu Liyue accepted it all and also took his leave with a chuckle. After some tossing and turning, the group finally left. Only when their figures had completely disappeared did the rest of the crowd gradually disperse. Family. In the study, Jun Jiuqing sat behind the table, looking at something. A figure hurried over. It was Yi Wenzhua. He went straight to the door and waved his hand at the 2 guards who were about to salute. You can leave first. This old man has something to say to the 9 ministers. The 2 guards looked at each other. Without the orders of the head of the family, they didn't dare to leave without permission. Even if this person was Yi Wenzhua. At this moment, Jun Jiuqing's voice came from the room. You can leave first. Hearing this, the 2 immediately heaved a sigh of relief, respectfully responded and left. Yi Wenzhua walked in and locked the door. After making sure that no one else was here, he looked at Jun Jiuqing who was sitting in the room. A crack appeared on the calm expression on his face, as if he was trying to hold back something. Jun Jiuqing looked up and smiled. Master, why are you here at this time? Yi Wenzhua walked in front of him without saying a word and looked at him with a complicated gaze. His gaze was suspicious and scrutinizing. After a long while, he asked in a deep voice. Big brother's death has something to do with you? This big brother was, of course, Yi Wentao. The smile on Jun Jiuqing's face faded a little, and he asked in surprise. Why do you say that, master? I heard that before he died that day, the only person he saw was you. Yi Wenzhua stared at him, his fists clenched in his sleeves. 9 ministers, do you dare say that this matter has nothing to do with you? Jun Jiuqing paused and said, That's right, I did go to see the head of the family that day. Because the subordinates kept saying that he was unwilling to use medicine, I wanted to persuade him. Unfortunately, the head of the family had lost his cultivation and no longer had the will to continue living. He chose to self-destruct because he couldn't accept the fact that he had become a cripple. This kind of life made him despair, and he would rather die. Master, a person like the head of the family has been proud his whole life. It's normal for him to make such a choice, isn't it? Jun Jiuqing's tone was calm, but his words were sharp and incisive. Yi Wenzhua frowned. He had to admit that what he said was indeed very reasonable. But he still felt that something was wrong. Yi Wenzhua stared at Jun Jiuqing, as if trying to find some clues from his face. But he couldn't find anything. Yi Wenzhua suddenly realized that he couldn't see through him at all. He took a deep breath and finally asked in a deep voice. Even so, then, what do you say about the family way? Wonderful book house. Chapter 2085. Family way? What about them? Jun Jiuqing raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he did not understand the meaning of his words. Yi Wenzhua snorted coldly and lowered his voice. You've been in contact with Wei Zai for a long time, haven't you? Jun Jiuqing smiled, and there was a hint of devilishness in his eyes. Master, Family Yi and Family Wei have always been in contact. Now that I'm the head of the family, isn't it normal for me to be in contact with Wei Zai? You clearly know that's not what I mean. Yi Wenzhua took a deep breath. Others may not know, but I do. That 10,000 Peaks halberd clearly belongs to family E. There are no more than 3 people in the entire Divine Ruins who know about this. But now, the 10,000 Peaks halberd has appeared in Wei Zai's hands out of the blue. Other than you, who else can quietly take away the 10,000 Peaks halberd? If anyone else was here and heard this, they would definitely be greatly shocked. Everyone thought that family E only had one sacred artifact, which was Yi Wentao's great azure sun axe. But in reality, the 10,000 Peaks halberd had belonged to them thousands of years ago. It was just that Yi Wentao had always kept a low profile when it came to such matters, so he deliberately concealed the existence of the 10,000 Peaks halberd. Yi Wenzhou only knew about it because he was Yi Wentao's younger brother. Recently, the matter of Tang Ke's tomb in the rocky forest had caused a great uproar, and news of the 10,000 Peaks halberd had already spread. In the rocky forest, in order to try to open Tang Ke's tomb, Wei Zai had taken out the 10,000 Peaks halberd. Unfortunately, it had not succeeded, and in the end, the 10,000 Peaks halberd had recognized Rong Xiu as its master. The latter was the most important point. Now, the 10,000 Peaks halberd has fallen into Rong Xiu's hands and has become his. Are you satisfied? But they didn't even have the right to make a fuss. This time, they had really suffered a loss. Jun Jiuqing's expression became much calmer. To tell you the truth, the 10,000 Peaks halberd was lent to Wei Zai temporarily. But at that time, he only said that he wanted to borrow a sacred weapon forged by Tang Ke back then to open Tang Ke's tomb and that he would return it after using it. I didn't expect the things that happened after that. You actually lent out such an important thing so easily? Yi Wentao asked in disbelief. Something seemed to be surging wildly in his chest. The Sun Great Axe has already been taken by Shengguanyu. Now, even the Myriad Peaks halberd has become Rong Xiu's. Jiuqing, what are you thinking? Jun Jiuqing looked at him calmly. Master, allow me to remind you that it's a sacred weapon. Sacred artifacts had spirits, and they had always chosen their own masters. Without this opportunity, even if one guarded it for thousands of years, they still wouldn't be able to obtain its recognition. On the other hand, some people were destined to become its master. This was something that could not be stopped. Although he didn't like Rong Xiu, this kind of thing couldn't be changed by force. Yi Wentao was speechless. He frowned and looked at Jun Jiuqing with a complicated expression. He suddenly realized that he didn't seem to understand him at all. At this moment, Jun Jiuqing's expression was indifferent, and his eyes were deep. Even though Yi Wentao had been his master for many years, he didn't know what he was thinking at this moment. Yi Wentao was suddenly at a loss. Did Jun Jiuqing become like this after becoming the head of family Yi, or was he always like this? You deliberately gave the Myriad Peaks halberd to Wei Zai. He said slowly and firmly. You and Wei Zai worked together to spread the news about Tang Ke's tomb, right? Jun Jiuqing didn't say anything. Yi Wentao closed his eyes. What are you trying to do? You're already the head of family Yi. But he didn't realize it before, but now he realized that Jun Jiuqing's actions seemed to be premeditated. Master, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Jun Jiuqing said and stood up. Family Yi's vitality has been greatly damaged, and it's time for them to rest. There are many things that they need your help with. You must take care of yourself. Yi Wentao suddenly felt a chill slowly rising from the soles of his feet. Chu Luiyue and the others successfully left the stone forest and returned to Peach Blossom Cove. It had been nearly 2 months since the day they left. To Chu Luiyue's joy, Shangguanyu and Chu Ning had both come. Shangguanyu had already broken through to the high god level, and Chu Ning had also broken through to the 9th stage in a short period of time. He was only 1 step away from the high god level. One had to know that he had started cultivating from the 1st stage. This speed was already heaven-defying. Moreover, he had the indestructible divine body. Even if he hadn't broken through to the high god level yet, he still had extremely strong combat power. The news in the stone forest had spread. Everyone knew that Chu Luiyue had obtained Tang Ke's inheritance and was very likely to become the next weapon refining saint in the future. The entire Peach Blossom Cove was jubilant. However, Shangguanyu didn't stay for too long. After seeing Chu Luiyue, he only stayed for a few days before leaving. After all, he still needed someone to look after the Tianling dynasty. Although Chu Luiyue was reluctant, he still sent someone to send him back. Now that she was the master of Peach Blossom Cove, many things were much more convenient. She didn't have to worry about going in and out of the Divine Ruins world. She could return at any time, and Shangguan Yu could also come over at any time. Chu Ning stayed behind and focused on his cultivation. Now, Chu Luiyue was his only family and the person he cared about the most. There was no point in returning to Yao Chen. It was better to stay and use the cultivation environment of Peach Blossom Cove to improve his strength. Everything was gradually on the right track. On this day, Chu Luiyue came to Qingshui Cliff. She was accompanied by Sanson. Sanson followed behind. As he walked, he said, "Master, if you need any medicinal herbs, just let me know. There's no need for you to come here personally, right? Look at how busy you are every day." Chu Luiyue waved her hand. "I'm not sure what I need, so I came to take a look first." Sanson scratched his head. "Then what do you want to do, master? Why don't you tell me? Maybe I can help you?" Chu Luiyue laughed and looked back at him, her eyes full of suspicion. Sanson coughed and straightened his back. "Of course, don't think that I'm not very talented in celestial physician. Recently, I've read a lot of ancient books and studied a lot of secret recipes." It was rare for Sanson to be so diligent. Chu Luiyue knew without asking that he was definitely trying to open up new markets. She chuckled. "You really can't help me with this." Sanson was a little unconvinced. "You can't look down on me like this. If you tell me, maybe I can really help." Chu Luiyue stood still and raised her chin. "Open. Wonderful book house." Chapter 2086. Even Shangguan Jing, Nen Suhuai, and the others were surprised. They knew very well that Chu Luiyue didn't have a divine body before. Now this must have been cultivated during this period of time. What kind of divine body is that? Brother Shangguan, why do I feel that it's different from yours? Zhao Song asked curiously. Since Chu Luiyue was Shangguan Jing's descendant and had his bloodline, they thought that she should have cultivated the same divine body. Shangguan Jing shook his head. "I don't know when you cultivated the divine body. Besides, she's very talented. Maybe she chose the most suitable divine body for herself." Zhao Song nodded thoughtfully. This statement was not without reason. Every cultivator's physique and talent were different. Even people from the same family would sometimes choose different divine bodies to cultivate. Shangguan Jing looked at Chu Luiyue's divine body carefully for a while, but he still couldn't recognize it. He turned to Nan Suhuai and asked in a low voice, "Dean Nan, do you recognize Yu's divine body?" Even though he had seen a lot, he still couldn't recognize it. Although Nan Suhuai's seniority was lower than his, as the dean of Lingxiao College, he had countless precious ancient books and should know more than him. Besides, Yu was a student of Lingxiao College. If she cultivated the divine body, she should have learned it from there. To his surprise, Nan Suhuai shook his head. "I don't know either." After pausing for a while, Nan Suhuai saw that Shangguan Jing and the others were a little surprised. Then he said, "Actually, Senior Shangguan, when Yu was in the college, she read a lot of related books and tried to cultivate it many times. There were many top divine bodies, but she couldn't succeed. So, I'm relieved to see that she has successfully cultivated her own divine body. But I don't know the origin of this divine body. Since Nan Suhuai said so, it must be true." Suddenly, Rong Xiu's cold and deep voice sounded. Just went through the God-destroying tribulation some time ago." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a dead silence. God-destroying tribulation? Shangguan Jing suddenly thought of something and gasped. "You mean?" Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curved slightly and he nodded gently. Her god body was refined by the God-destroying tribulation. Chu Luiyue tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and his body instantly shot out like an arrow. He drew a straight red line in the air and went straight for Yi Wentao. The two of them faced each other, and the distance between them was rapidly shrinking. Compared to Yi Wentao's exceptionally tall and sturdy omnidirectional divine body, Chu Liuyue's figure seemed exceptionally small. It was as if Yi Wentao could easily kill her with a single strike. In fact, Yi Wentao thought the same. When he saw Chu Liyue summon the godly body, he was a little surprised, but it was only for a moment. She was an exalted god, and it was normal for her to have a godly body. There was nothing to be surprised about. Although Yi Wentao could not tell what godly body she cultivated at first glance, there were hundreds and thousands of ways to cultivate godly bodies in this world. He could not possibly know all of them. Even if he could not tell, it did not matter. He did not need to pay attention to it at all, because his omnidirectional divine body was the top existence among all godly bodies. It was also because of this unique and powerful godly body that he had always been the head of the family Yi all these years. Now, Chu Liyue was planning to fight him head-on with her godly body. It seemed that her brain was really muddled. Yi Wentao sneered and threw a punch. The wind from the punch suddenly arrived. The strong wind came head-on and swept up Chu Liyue's black hair. She stared straight ahead, and the power in her body was continuously gathering in her right hand at this moment. Then, she raised her arm directly and threw a punch, meeting Yi Wentao's punch. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Chu Liyue chose to fight Yi Wentao head-on? Wouldn't she, a mere high god, lose in such a hand-to-hand fight? This punch would probably cripple her even if she did not die. Yi Wentao sneered. It's been so long, but her arrogance hasn't changed at all. She was like this a few years ago, and she's still like this a few years later. In fact, she's becoming more and more arrogant. Jun Jiuqing stared at the field with a devilish look in his eyes, and his hands slowly clenched in his sleeves. He did not respond to Yi Wentao's words. However, the family Yi and Nan family members behind him had the same attitude as Yi Wentao. That's right. That Shangguan Yu really thinks that she's great just because she has some talent. She doesn't know that there's always someone better than her. How can the gap between a high god and a high god be so easily bridged? Even if her crimson gold celestial phoenix successfully opened its fifth meridian, I'm afraid it's too late. This time, it's finally over. Chu Liyue turned a deaf ear to the noise. Her eyes burned with a strong desire to fight, and she pressed forward with indomitable will. Bam! Their fists collided. There was a dull thud. After a short pause, the ground around the two of them began to crack rapidly. The cracks spread like a spider web. It was obvious that the collision of the two of them in this fight was terrifying. However, what shocked everyone was that Chu Liyue did not fly out as expected. She did not even move back half an inch. Everyone was stunned. Chu Liyue actually took the full blow of Yi Wentao's omnidirectional divine body? There was silence. Only the two of them were still fighting each other. Green and dazzling lights intertwined, and it was almost impossible to open one's eyes. Dark red blood slowly seeped out of the corner of Chu Liyue's mouth, and it made her look even paler. However, she was still standing on the same spot, facing off against Yi Wentao. At this moment, the surrounding Xian formations that had not been destroyed suddenly moved. Yi Wentao's divine body had destroyed the few Xian formations in the center and passed through them to fight with Chu Liyue. Therefore, Yi Wentao's divine body was standing on one side of the Xian formations, while his physical body was standing on the other side. Now, these Xian formations were operating very quickly, and they connected with each other again, filling up the broken parts and forming a complete giant net, which was heading towards Yi Wentao's physical body. Yi Wentao was originally standing at the back, waiting to see Chu Liyue get dealt with. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong, and when he looked, he realized that he was surrounded by those Xian formations again. Moreover, although there were fewer Xian formations than before, the power on them did not decrease at all. In fact, it seemed to have become stronger. Feeling the terrifying pressure, Yi Wentao's heart skipped a beat. How can this be? Chu Liyue's origin power should be almost depleted. Chu Liyue's gaze turned slightly, and her red lips suddenly curved into a cold arc. I forgot to say. Although I'm only a high god, the origin power in your body may not be comparable to mine. Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2087. I've seen it with my own eyes. Chu Luiwei didn't say that out loud. Su Li didn't look like she was faking it. She was such a powerful being that there were countless high gods and even venerables who were willing to follow her. Since she had said so, it was most likely true. But if that was the case, then what was going on with Dabeo? Chu Luiwei remembered clearly that he had rebuilt his divine body in the Red Moon Desert. And at that time, in order to save her, he had transformed into a child in a moment of desperation. Speaking of external help, at the last moment, Dabeo had used her blood. But Chu Luiwei didn't take it to heart. Judging from the reaction of Dabeo and the other two, they didn't want her help from the beginning. They were planning to rebuild their divine bodies by themselves. So much so that Chu Luiwei had always thought that everyone was like that. But after hearing Su Li's words, she realized that her understanding was wrong. Su Li reached out and waved her hand in front of Chu Luiwei. What are you thinking? Chu Luiwei came back to her senses and smiled. Nothing. Actually, I've heard this from others. So it's wrong. Then, Mr. Su, is there really no one in this world who can do this? You mean to say that one can rebuild their divine body purely with their own strength? Su Li didn't see the abnormality in her expression and thought that she had misheard. She shook her head gently. I've never heard of such a thing. Chu Luiwei lowered her eyes. But Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly as if she was thinking about something. Maybe someone stronger than venerables can do it. Who knows? Chu Luiwei looked up at her in surprise. Someone stronger than venerables? Yes. But such a powerful person only exists in legends. Even Tang Ku and I have never seen such a person. By the way, I heard that you're a student of Lingxiao College? Yes. Some people say that the first dean of Lingxiao College was such a person. It's just that no one has personally verified it. Later on, he mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Those rumors about him were gradually drowned out by time, and no one mentioned it anymore. Su Li shook her head regretfully. Chu Luiwei's heart was in turmoil. In that case, Dabeo, seeing Chu Luiwei fall into silence, Su Li thought that she was still worried about the matter of reconstructing her physical body, so she comforted her. You don't have to worry too much. Even if you don't succeed in the end, it doesn't matter. Even if I don't have a physical body, I'm already very satisfied with this soul. Needless to say, she could still come out and see the wind and sunlight, and see all kinds of people in this world. To her, this was already extremely fortunate. Chu Luiwei collected his thoughts, and the emotions in his eyes were completely restrained. She smiled. No matter what, let's try it first. You manner. In the study, Rong Xiu was writing something. Yuemo walked in hurriedly. Your Highness, there's news from the family Wei. Rong Xiu didn't stop what he was doing. Speak. Yuemo said. Some time ago, the family Wei's elder, Wei Qihan, did go out alone once. No one knows where he went or what he did. Rong Xiu's expression was calm, and his voice was light. What about the family? Yuemo lowered his head. The family Yi has been in chaos for a long time. It only calmed down after Yi Wentao died. However, because Yi Wentao self-destructed and suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of Madame at Peach Blossom Cove, the family Yi felt embarrassed and didn't hold a grand funeral. They only buried him in a hurry. As for the Thousand Peaks halberd, it didn't cause much of a stir. That was natural. After all, the number of family Yi who knew about the existence of the Thousand Peaks halberd could be counted on one hand. Rong Xiu smiled. What's there to bury when the body and soul are destroyed? It's just a formality. Jun Jiuqing's ability to make an example out of someone was getting better and better. Yuemo sighed. No matter what, Yi Wentao was once a powerful figure in the family Yi. No one in the family Yi dared to say no to him in the past 100 years. Who knew that he would end up like this after his death? The past is the past after all. Rong Xiu put down his pen and picked up the paper in his hand to read it again. Jun Jiuqing had worked hard to get to where he was today. Naturally, he had to seize every opportunity to gain a foothold. Yi Wentao was just a stepping stone for him. The family Yi was originally very unwilling to stand on his side. Many of them were eyeing the position of the head of the family covetously. However, all of this quietly subsided with Yi Wentao's death. Everyone could see that Jun Jiuqing was definitely involved in Yi Wentao's death. However, this was the result that Jun Jiuqing wanted. Sometimes, forceful suppression was faster and more effective than any conciliatory method. He paused. Jun Jiuqing has always been a smart person. Yuemo asked hesitantly. Your Highness, are you going to let them collude like this? Jun Jiuqing is determined to take down the family Yi. For this reason, he didn't hesitate to give away Wan Feng halberd and use the family Yi to send I away. Since that's the case, I will give him face. Although he didn't care about Wan Feng halberd, it was a good opportunity to bring Tang Ku and Su Li out and establish Yu Er's prestige. Wei Zhe will contact the family Yi in the future. Just wait and see. Yuemo immediately replied, yes. At this moment, someone else walked in from outside the door. It was Yan Qing. Your Highness. As soon as Yan Qing walked in, he knelt down and bowed. His brows were slightly furrowed, and his expression was somewhat heavy. Yuemo rarely saw such an expression, and his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Could it be that something happened? Rong Xiu raised his chin. Just stand up and speak. Only then did Yan Qing stand up. He took out a letter from his bosom and said in a deep voice, Your Highness, the patriarch has passed away. 36 respected Elder Ming sent a letter back and asked you to set off immediately. When Yuemo heard the first half of the sentence, he didn't realize what was going on. However, when he heard the second half, he immediately widened his eyes in shock and almost jumped up. The patriarch has passed away? This was too sudden. Rong Xiu didn't look surprised. His slender fingers moved slightly, and the paper in his hand flew to Yan Qing. This is the eulogy I wrote for the patriarch. Copy it and distribute it to all the respected elders. Yuemo turned around with a shocked expression. When he came in, he saw that His Highness was writing something. However, he never expected that he was writing a eulogy for the patriarch. Your Highness? You already know? Yan Qing caught the paper and instantly understood something. He nodded respectfully. Rong Xiu tilted his head and looked out of the window. There were no clouds in the sky and the weather was good. Today's weather is good. It was a good day to send someone off. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2088. Chu Luiyue and Su Li discussed and chose some herbs, intending to try a few more times. Maybe they would succeed by a stroke of luck? After a long time, the two of them walked out of the room. Sanson, who was waiting outside, hurried forward with a face full of smiles. Master, Mr. Su, why did the two of you come out so quickly? Aren't you going to take a look? Chu Luiyue glanced at him. It was rare for this kid to be so generous. Don't you feel bad? What are you talking about? Sanson chuckled. Sanson's herbs are yours. You can just come and take whatever you want. Besides, if these herbs can really help Mr. Su, it's my honor, isn't it? This was the famous Mr. Su. It was rumored that he was one of the only 2 refining saints in the world of God. Even a venerable god would not dare to be presumptuous in front of such a person. They could not wait to suck up to him. What were these herbs? If they could build a relationship with this person, it would be a huge gain. Su Li covered her mouth and smiled. Your subordinate is really interesting. Sanson straightened his back after being praised, and his face was full of joy. Chu Luiyue looked at him sympathetically. Fortunately, Senior Tang Ku was not here now, otherwise, Mr. Su will be with me during this time, but not many people know about this. Master, don't worry. Sanson knows what to say and what not to say. Sanson immediately made a zipping motion on his mouth. Chu Luiyue nodded with satisfaction. It's good that you know. Actually, she was not worried about this. The people of the 13th Yu sect were all tight-lipped, especially Sanson. This was also one of the reasons why she brought Sanson with her. I'll have to trouble you, for the rest. After saying that, Su Li's figure flashed and disappeared again. Sanson smacked his lips and still felt that it was unbelievable. While waiting, he had already guessed that Mr. Su must have been brought back by his master when she went to Tang Ku's tomb. Judging from Mr. Su's attitude, he seemed to be quite close to his master. He knew that his master was powerful, but he didn't expect that even someone like Mr. Su could. Sanson gave him a thumbs up and was sincerely convinced. Master, you're really awesome. Sanson believed that she was already very good at making connections, but compared to her master, TSK, they couldn't compare. As long as she followed her master well, what else was impossible? Chu Luiwei was already immune to Sanson's flattery and praise. He raised his chin. Let's go. Chu Luiwei and Sanson quickly returned to the Yu residence. Naturally, they quickly learned of the news of Bailey Jun's death. He's gone? Chu Luiwei was originally flipping through a medical book. When he heard this, he immediately stopped what he was doing and looked up in surprise. Rong Xiu was sitting by the window drinking tea. White mist rose in spirals, covering his eyes and brows, making it difficult for people to see through him. Yes, yesterday. His subordinates said that he was unconscious when he left, so he did not suffer any torture. His tone was very indifferent, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. After a short moment of surprise, Chu Luiwei quickly reacted. Rong Xiu and Bailey Jun had always been on bad terms, so it was normal for him to have this attitude. Bailey Jun had been killed by the Black Demon Cave, and only the people of the Black Demon Cave knew how to cure him. However, the Black Demon Cave had been completely wiped out, and Emo Shiqian, the only one who had escaped, had his body destroyed, leaving only a soul. It was not surprising that Bailey Jun had fallen into such a state. However, it seemed that Rong Xiu had no intention of helping Bailey Jun from the beginning. After all, you're the leader of the Yuntian Tower. You still have to go back and deal with this matter personally, right? Chu Luiwei asked. Rong Xiu nodded. 36 respected Elder Ming has already sent a message. I waited for you to come back because I wanted to discuss with you when to set off. As the princess consort of the Yuntian Tower, Chu Luiwei naturally had to go back. For this kind of matter, the sooner the better. Chu Luiwei rubbed the space between her eyebrows. She had planned to take advantage of this time to study how to help Su Li recover her body. Tang Ke used to be a god-level expert, so there was no need to worry too much. She did not expect that before she could take action, such a thing would happen. Even though everyone knew that Rong Xiu had already fallen out with Bailey Chun, they still had to save face for Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu looked at her and asked, "Are you worried about Mr. Su's body?" Chu Luiwei sighed. But Mr. Su was not a god-level expert in the past, so this matter is a little troublesome. I've been reading a lot of medical books recently, but I haven't been able to find a good way. Actually, it was not that there was no way. Other than rebuilding the body, they could also take over the body. But for someone like Su Li, Chu Luiwei knew that she would never do such a thing. She had to think of another way. Rong Xiu took a sip of tea and thought of something. By the way, the Yuntian Tower has a lot of treasured ancient books. Maybe we can find a way. Chu Luiwei's eyes lit up. That's right. I almost forgot about that. The Yuntian Tower had been passed down for thousands of years. It was one of the top clans in the entire world of God. It had a deep foundation and countless treasures. Maybe they could really find something useful. Then let's hurry. Many things in Peach Blossom Dock were already on track, so she did not have to worry much. Also, after the Yuntian Tower's matter is over, I plan to go to the Red Moon Desert personally. Chu Luiwei said firmly. Calculating the time, the dangerous months should have passed. This time, she had to go no matter what. Rong Xiu's lips curved up slightly. All right. The next morning, the duo set off for the Yuntian Tower. After a long journey, they finally reached their destination. By the time they arrived at the ethereal hall, the exalted elders were already there. Seeing the two figures walking side by side and entering hand in hand, many people in the hall had complicated feelings. It had only been a few months since their wedding. However, too many things had happened during this period of time. Chu Luiwei had taken over the Peach Blossom Dock and become the head of the Yu clan. Chu Luiwei had made a name for herself after making a bet with Iwentao. It was said that she had even recruited many God Realm experts to her side, and the cultivators in Peach Blossom Dock were willing to follow her lead. All in all, even if Chu Luiwei didn't have the identity of the princess consort of the Yuntian Tower, she could still stand on equal footing with any of the top clans in the world of God. Even if the Yu clan's foundation was still shallow, it couldn't stop them from having countless experts and rich resources. Looking at the smiling, slender and exquisite woman, who would have thought that she had actually relied on her own strength to reach her current position? Recalling the mockery and contempt they had for her in the past, many people felt embarrassed. 36 Exalted Elder Ming was delighted, and he was once again impressed by his holy son's eyesight. If it wasn't for the fact that they were discussing Bailey June's funeral, he would have welcomed her happily. 36 Exalted Elder Ming coughed and walked forward with a solemn expression. Holy Son. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2089. What's going on with the clan leader? Rong Xiu went straight to the point. 36 Respected Elder Ming cupped his hands. Your Highness, actually, the clan leader's condition has not been very good. Ever since he fell into a coma, the strength in his body has been depleted. We've tried all sorts of methods. He sighed. Moreover, the clan leader is depressed and shows no signs of waking up. We've tried our best, but we're still unable to reverse the situation. The hall suddenly became much quieter. Chu Luiwei raised his eyebrows slightly. These words were somewhat interesting. There was nothing much to say about being poisoned and causing him to fall into a coma. But to be depressed, he didn't need to think to know the reason. Back in Fangzhou City, the matter of Bailey Jun mistaking Jiang Jiwan for his bloodline had caused an uproar. No man could stand this kind of thing, let alone someone like Bailey Jun. He had been unparalleled in his life, noble and proud. He had always thought highly of himself. How could he accept such humiliation? Even if no one did anything to him, he probably didn't want to come out to see anyone again. It was fine if no one said anything before, but now that 36 Respected Elder Ming mentioned it, although it was very vague, everyone knew what was going on. Actually, they also felt embarrassed. Rong Xiu's brows twitched slightly, as if he was somewhat regretful. Some time ago, I and you accidentally found the current nest of the Black Demon Cave. We wanted to force Mo Shiqian to hand over the method to unlock the seal, but who knew that he was so cunning that he didn't hesitate to sacrifice the entire Black Demon Cave's subordinates to help himself escape. If I could have stopped him back then, perhaps the clan leader? Everyone in the hall was shocked. There's actually such a thing? That's too dangerous. Fortunately, His Highness and the Princess Consort are safe and sound. That's right. The people of the Black Demon Cave have always been cunning. It's already not easy for His Highness and the Princess Consort to return safely. Other things can't be forced. Because this matter happened outside of the Divine Ruins world, not many people in the Divine Ruins world knew about it. And because Mo Shiqian was still on the run, Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu didn't spread the news. Therefore, not even the revered elders of the Yuntian Tower knew about it. When he heard this, he was naturally filled with shock. Chu Luiwei silently glanced at the man beside her. I don't remember Rong Xiu mentioning anything about Bailey Jun, 36 Respected Elder Ming hurriedly asked. Were His Highness and Princess Consort injured? Rong Xiu's expression was calm as a faint smile appeared on his lips. They're all minor injuries. It's worth it to be able to wipe out the Black Demon Cave. The originally noisy hall once again fell into a strange silence. Even 36 Respected Elder Ming had a stunned expression on his face. What? Speaking of which, it's all thanks to you. If she hadn't asked for help, we might not have been able to escape unscathed. As Rong Xiu spoke, he looked at Chu Luiwei proudly. Chu Luiwei sighed. Unfortunately, Mo Shiqian still escaped. Everyone was in a mess. Do you know what you're talking about? That's the Black Demon Cave. How can you say that you destroyed their nest so casually? Doesn't your conscience hurt? Everyone looked at the two of them as if they were looking at two monsters. These two people were too perverted. Some people secretly wiped their sweat, glad that they didn't take things too hard and offend these two people. Some were filled with uneasiness and uneasiness. They thought that it was already shocking to invite the patriarchs of two ancient divine beast clans to support the wedding. They never expected that there would be something even more outrageous. They really didn't know how His Highness chose this heaven-defying princess. Originally, he alone was already awe-inspiring enough. Now, there was also Chu Luiwei. They simply didn't want anyone to live. 36 respected Elder Ming's eyes wandered back and forth between the two of them. He stroked his beard and sighed. Sigh, actually, Your Highness has already done your best for the patriarch. It's a pity that the patriarch's luck was a little bad. He has already passed away. Your Highness, don't be too sad about this. I'll have to trouble Your Highness with the following matters. Rong Xiu nodded. Of course. The patriarch sacrificed a lot for the Yuntian Tower when he was alive. Now that he's dead, he naturally has to be buried grandly. Inform the people of the 28 divisions that everyone must be present to send off the patriarch on his last journey. 36 respected Elder Ming asked hesitantly. Of course, Your Highness, there's no problem with doing this, but is the Immortal Water Mausoleum going to be the same? At the mention of the Immortal Water Mausoleum, everyone's expressions became interesting. That was the Jiang family's territory. Although the patriarch of the Jiang family in the Immortal Water Mausoleum had changed, the previous incident still happened to the Jiang family. If they came, wouldn't the situation be very awkward? Bailey Jun was dead, but they were still alive. They still wanted to save face. Rong Xiu's expression didn't change. Of course. A dead person is like an extinguished lamp. Let bygones be bygones. It would have been better if he hadn't said anything. Now that he said it, the atmosphere became even more awkward. How could they let this matter pass? The storm had finally calmed down. If they made a big fuss now, what would the other aristocratic families think of them? After a moment, a respected elder spoke hesitantly. Your Highness, this matter should be considered at length, right? The patriarch was very controversial when he was alive. Why don't we let him pass away quietly? What do you think? With one person taking the lead, the rest immediately followed suit. That's right, Your Highness. Speaking of which, the patriarch died at the hands of the Black Demon Cave. If this matter was publicized, it would be bad for the reputation of the Yuntian Tower and the patriarch. Shouldn't we keep a low profile? That's right. If the patriarch's spirit is in heaven, he should also wish for this, right? We can all understand Your Highness's feelings, but this matter is not trivial. I hope Your Highness will reconsider. Everyone chimed in and quickly reached a consensus. They all persuaded Rong Xiu to give up on the idea of burying Bailey Jun. Rong Xiu frowned slightly, seemingly hesitant. 36 respected Elder Ming cupped his fists and bowed. I hope Your Highness will consider the Yuntian Tower. The bigger picture is more important. Rong Xiu was silent for a long time. Finally he said, Alright. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2090. Yan Qing. Rong Xiu tilted his head slightly. Yan Qing, who was following behind him, immediately stepped forward and took out a stack of papers. This is the eulogy I wrote for the patriarch. Everyone, please burn it in front of the patriarch's tomb to comfort his soul in heaven. After that, Yan Qing went over and distributed the papers. One for each person. There was no mistake. She had done all she could to go this far. There was nothing to nitpick about. Chu Luiwei was in awe as she watched from the side. TSK. In fact, from the beginning, Rong Xiu didn't intend to worry about this matter. What he said just now was just for show. But in this way, everything went smoothly. Even if this matter was spread out later, he would only agree to it because everyone begged him. He wouldn't be blamed at all. Bailey Jun had been the hegemon of the Yuntian Tower for many years, but in the end, he ended up in such a miserable state. Of course, he had only himself to blame for all this. Bailey June was buried in a hurry. He didn't have any children, and his reputation was ruined because of the incident in Fangzhou City. No one in the entire Yuntian Tower went to pay respects to him. After his death, the name Bailey June seemed to be quickly forgotten by everyone. It was as if this person had never existed here. On the day of his burial, Rong Xiu officially became the patriarch of the Yuntian Tower in the main hall of the sacrificial god temple. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. Chu Luiyue knew that Rong Xiu had his own plans, so he didn't interfere. After arriving at the Yuntian Tower, he went straight to the library. As Rong Xiu said, the books in the library of the Yuntian Tower were extremely precious. Some of them were books that Chu Luiyue hadn't even seen in Lingxiao College. The number of books in the library was indeed astonishing. Chu Luiyue read very quickly. At first, she only chose medical books, but later, she gradually picked some miscellaneous books. She learned a lot from them, but she still didn't find what she wanted the most. After reading for a few days without sleep, Chu Luiyue couldn't help but feel discouraged. Putting the books in his hand back, Chu Luiyue let out a long breath. Rong Xiu walked over. There are so many books. You can't finish reading them in a short time. As he said, he carried her and walked to the small bed beside him. Chu Luiyue originally wanted to struggle, but she really couldn't take it anymore after a few days. Thus, she obediently leaned into his embrace. There were too many books here. Even if she read for half a year, she probably wouldn't be able to finish them all. What if she still couldn't find a solution after reading all of them? Rong Xiu, don't you think I'm wasting too much time searching like this? Rong Xiu gently placed her on the small couch and sat at the side. He then placed her head on his lap, and his slender fingers touched her temple as he started to massage it with moderate strength. Chu Luiyue snuggled into his arms comfortably. Rong Xiu paused and looked at her with a deep gaze. Don't move. Chu Luiyue immediately became obedient. Oh. Rong Xiu adjusted her posture before continuing. He asked casually, this is not easy. It's not that easy to begin with. After all, no one has ever done this before. Chu Luiyue was silent for a moment, then suddenly opened her eyes. No, maybe someone has done this before. She straightened up and threw herself into Rong Xiu's arms. She placed her hands on his chest and said word by word, I'm going to Peach Blossom Cove now. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2091. Rong Xiu was originally sitting down, but when she moved, he immediately reached out one hand to support himself on the couch and used the other hand to support her waist. Their bodies were close together. She was on top and he was on the bottom. They could smell each other's breaths. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. Are you sure you want to talk to me like this? Chu Luiyue realized that their posture was not right. She blushed and immediately wanted to crawl away. Rong Xiu held her waist, raised his head slightly, and kissed her lips. His deep voice was blurred between their lips. I'll go with you. Chu Luiyue thought in a daze that this was not bad. Tang Ke had been following Rong Xiu. If the two of them went together, they might be able to help Tang Ku and Su Li recover together. Of course, she also wanted to see how Dabeo and the rest were doing. Sensing that she was distracted, Rong Xiu bit her gently. Hiss. Chu Luiyue subconsciously moved back and murmured, feeling wronged. It hurts. Rong Xiu chuckled and comforted her patiently. I'll be gentler. Red Moon Desert. Unknowingly, the overwhelming crimson color had quietly dissipated. The blazing sun scorched the vast desert. The terrifyingly high temperature seemed to burn even the air. There was no wind, but heat waves rolled. Only the blue waves in the middle of the desert occasionally rippled. Under the lake, there was a cage that was dark and sunless. The strong smell of blood filled the air. There were dark red bloodstains everywhere, as if an unusually fierce battle had just taken place. 3 figures sat facing each other in a triangle. They were Dugumabao and his companions. At this moment, an extremely complicated silver Xian formation was floating above their heads, rotating slowly. A faint glow enveloped the three of them. It was extremely powerful. If Chu Luiwei was here, he would definitely discover that this profound formation was extremely similar to the one summoned by Lingxiao College on Thousand Wine Mountain, but it was even more complicated and obscure. Under the profound formation, there was a palm-sized black shadow at the center of the three people. There seemed to be some kind of strange pattern on the shadow, but it was incomplete and could not be distinguished. Time passed slowly, and the shadow gradually faded away. When the last dot completely disappeared, the profound formation above the three people's heads also stopped rotating at the same time, and then dissipated with a loud bang. Dugu Mabao's body shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Diwu Zhangzi's and Lan Zhao's conditions weren't any better. Their auras had become much weaker. Motherf *Ker, he's so hard to deal with. Diwu Zhangzi forced himself to hold on, and couldn't help but curse. Fortunately, Re and Rong Xiu released this old man's aura, otherwise he might not have been able to make it through this time. He looked at Dugu Mabao and Lan Xiao. How are you guys? Dugu Mabao raised his hand, wiped the blood from the corner of his lips, and slowly opened his eyes. I'm fine. Lan Xiao was still chained up, and he could only barely move when he heard that. He raised a hand, covered half of his face, and laughed. What a pity. I was quite satisfied with this face this time, but it was ruined just like that. Diwu Zhangzi frowned. You're still thinking about this at a time like this? Although that was what he said, he still heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Lan Xiao still had the mood to talk about this. Lan Zhao's mouth twitched, and the face under his hand was already badly damaged. Don't worry, I won't die. It's not that easy to take my life. It's naturally not easy to kill you when you're at your peak, but it's not difficult to take your life now. Dugu Mabao looked over coldly, and his voice didn't fluctuate as he spoke. Lan Xiao pursed his lips and tried hard to roll his eyes. I knew you wouldn't say anything good. Dugu Mabao ignored him and continued, your soul can't last for too long. If you can't reconstruct your divine body as soon as possible, it's only a matter of time before your soul disperses. After saying that, the surroundings went silent for a moment. They all knew that Dugu Mabao was speaking the truth. After a while, Lan Xiao leaned lazily against the stone wall behind him and muttered with a headache, reconstruct your divine body? It's easy to say, but do you think everyone is as sick as you? Moreover, he had already failed once before, which made things worse. He could barely survive the dangerous months this time because of Dugu Mabao and Diwu Zhangzi's help. How could it be so easy to reconstruct his divine body? Then, the corners of his mouth twitched as he chuckled nonchalantly. It's fine even if I can't survive. I've been trapped in this lousy place for so long. Even if you guys aren't annoyed, I'm annoyed, Dugu Mabao said coldly. If you want to die, why didn't you seize any of the many chances in the past 10,000 years? Lan Xiao couldn't keep his face straight. I'm just saying. What do you take it for real? Diwu Zhangzi held his forehead helplessly. The dangerous months had just ended, and they were arguing again. He really didn't know how he had been stuck between the two of them all these years. Besides, even if I'm really going to die, I have to see you one more time before I die, right? Suddenly, Dugu Mabao's expression changed slightly and he stood up. She's here. He turned around and glanced at Lan Xiao indifferently. You can die without regrets. Lan Xiao. Will it kill you to say something nice? Can't you see that I'm already in this state? Even if she's here, wait, who did you say came? Lan Xiao was about to scold him when he suddenly froze. Diwu Zhangzi had already reacted. He was delighted at first, then asked nervously, is here? How did she get here so quickly? Dugu Mabao frowned slightly. The dangerous months this time are longer than before, so she's not that fast anymore. After all, it's been a long time since Rong Xiu sent Diwu Zhangzi's aura back. But fortunately, it's all in the past. That won't do. Our current situation, Diwu Zhangzi was fine, but Dugu Mabao was injured, and Lan Xiao was the most seriously injured. But if that last saw it, she would definitely guess something. Lan Xiao hurriedly said, That's right. My face hasn't recovered yet, So I can't see her. I can't see her. Dugu Mabao glanced at the two of them. She can't enter this place for the time being, so what are you worried about? After his reminder, Diu Zhangzi and Lan Xiao came back to their senses and heaved a sigh of relief. That's good, Rong Xiu is here too. Dugu Mabao's eyes were filled with impatience. Diu Zhangzi hesitated. It's probably because I told them about the dangerous months last time, so they came together because they were worried. Dugu Mabao said, stay here. You guys stay here. I'll go out and meet them. At the same time, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu finally arrived at the lake. Chu Luiyue surveyed her surroundings and slightly knitted her brows. Rong Xiu asked, what's wrong? I don't know. I keep feeling that something is wrong here. It's different from before. Chu Luiyue's nose twitched slightly, and a hint of suspicion flashed across her eyes. Rong Xiu, do you smell blood? Rong Xiu's eyes flickered slightly and he shook his head. He looked around as well. This place seems to be the same as before. What do you think is wrong? Chu Luiyue didn't say anything. Yes, she knew that this desert didn't look any different from before. As far as the eye could see, it was still an endless stretch of yellow sand. And the lake in front of her was still the same as before. It was difficult for such a simple and vast scenery to change. But she just felt that something was different. This feeling was very subtle, and she didn't know how to describe it. Maybe it's my illusion. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a while before saying with some uncertainty. Rong Xiu squeezed her hand, and his slightly calloused palm completely covered her hand. Maybe it's because of Wei Yu? Chu Luiyue was deep in thought. Maybe, she shook her head and suppressed these messy thoughts. I wonder how Dabeo and the others are doing now. Before she finished speaking, layers of ripples suddenly appeared on the surface of the water. The lake water slowly separated from the middle, and a small figure walked out. It was a boy who looked to be 3 or 4 years old. He had purple hair and purple eyes, and was very cute. Only the astonishing pressure faintly emitted from his body made people dare not underestimate him. Chu Luiyue was delighted. Dabeo! When Dugu Mabao saw her, a faint smile finally appeared on his iceberg-like face. But this smile quickly disappeared when he saw Rong Xiu standing next to him. Rong Xiu nodded slightly. Senior Dugu. Chu Luiyue had long been used to Dugu Mabao's cold appearance, so she didn't care. She quickly went forward and asked, Dabeo, how are you doing? Also, how are Senior Diwu and Senior Lan Xiao? Wonderful book house. Chapter 2092. Dugu Mabao leaped into the air and arrived in front of the two of them in an instant. He landed on the sand dune and raised his wrist gently. The separated lake quickly closed and returned to its original calm state. Don't worry, we're all fine. Chu Luiyue breathed a sigh of relief when she heard that. That's good. She had been very worried when she heard Diwu Zhangzi talk about the dangerous moon. It seemed to be very serious and dangerous. Diwu Zhangzi and the other two weren't ordinary people. Until now, Chu Luiyue still didn't know how strong they were. The only thing she was sure of was that they were definitely more powerful than she expected. Even they found this dangerous moon tricky. It was not hard to imagine how dangerous the situation was. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue's eyes focused and stared at Dugu Mabao. Dugu Mabao noticed something and asked, What's wrong? Chu Luiyue did not speak. She walked straight to Dugu Mabao and pointed at his collar. What's this? Dugu Mabao was taken aback as he lowered his head to take a look. Only then did he see that his collar was stained with blood. The blood was only the size of a fingernail and had already soaked into his clothes. It was very inconspicuous. But Chu Luiyue's eyes were sharp and saw it at a glance. Dugu Mabao frowned slightly. It should have been accidentally stained when he vomited blood at the end. Because she came at such a coincidence, he did not have time to check it carefully before coming out. It's a little blood. Dugu Mabao looked up. The expression in his eyes had returned to calmness. It's inevitable to get injured in the dangerous moon, but it's not a big deal. After he finished speaking, with a thought, a ray of light flashed, and the blood stain disappeared completely. Under the illumination of the sun, his clothes were like armor, glowing with a delicate and light light. His tone was casual, as if he did not take this matter to heart at all. Chu Luiyue scrutinized him, as if trying to determine if he was telling the truth. Dugumaba looked at her quietly. Chu Luiyue felt a little helpless. Dabeo looked like a child, but in reality he was an old fox who had lived for countless years. His intelligence and means were not lacking. If he really wanted to hide something, it should be very difficult for her to detect it. The two of them looked at each other for a moment, but Chu Luiyue couldn't see anything. In the end, he could only give up. "It's good that you're all right." She looked at the calm lake again. "Where are Senior Diwu and Senior Lanxiao? Why didn't he come out?" If it was in the past, they would have greeted her the moment she entered the Red Moon Desert. This time, however, it was strangely quiet. After Diwu merged with that aura, he has been recuperating. Lanxiao is thinking about reconstructing his divine body. Dugumabao's answer was flawless. Chu Luiyue calmed down a little. Hearing Shi Yan mention the god body, he remembered the purpose of this trip. "By the way, Dabeo, speaking of this, I have something to ask you." "Speak." Chu Luiyue paused and asked word by word. "Previously, when you reconstructed your divine body, how did you do it?" Dugumabao looked at her strangely. "Weren't you there at that time too? She should be the one who knew best how he did it." Chu Luiyue shook her head. "No, what I mean is that ordinary cultivators can't do it with their own strength, but you." Dugumabao's eyes showed a hint of dissatisfaction. "I'm not an ordinary cultivator. Of course I can do it." Who was she questioning? Chu Luiyue. It had been so long, so his arrogant and conceited personality hadn't changed at all. She suddenly let out a long sigh of relief and couldn't help but rub Dabeo's hair. Dabeo's expression changed. Just as he was about to flare up, he heard Chu Luiyue sigh. "Hearing you say that, I'm relieved." Dabeo was still the same Dabeo. If he could say something like that, it meant that the situation should be fine. Hearing this, Dabao paused. He looked up and saw her smiling brightly as if she had heaved a sigh of relief. The anger in his heart suddenly disappeared without a trace. Chu Luiyue was a little curious and asked excitedly, "So, your strength is really above the venerable gods?" Dabeo tilted his head and looked at her impatiently. His face said, "Do you still need to ask such nonsense?" Chu Luiyue retracted her hand in embarrassment. Big brother, I can't afford to offend him. You came this time to ask about this?" Dabeo's voice was already full of undisguised disdain. Chu Luiyue shook her head. "No, I came this time to do two things. The first thing I want to ask is, do you know how to help a 9th stage warrior reconstruct his physical body? I've read many books, but I couldn't find the answer." Dugumabao narrowed his eyes. "Who do you want to help?" Chu Luiyue immediately told him about Su Li. "There's really no other way, so I thought that maybe you would know. It's a small matter." He interrupted Chu Luiyue. "What's the second thing?" Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. He actually knew. However, before she could be shocked, she immediately said when she heard Dugumabao's question. "The second thing is, I thought that I helped you reconstruct your divine body before, so I came this time to help Senior Diwu and Senior Lanxiao." Before she could finish speaking, Dugumabao's face darkened. "No." Chu Luiyue was stunned. "Why not?" "There's no why." Dugumabao's attitude was very firm. "I said no, and it means no." Wonderful book house, you're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.